The Amazon, vast and unyielding, stretches across the northern reaches of South America, its rivers weaving through a mosaic of verdant canopy and shadowed undergrowth. Long before European eyes glimpsed its endless green, this land had been home to human communities, quietly shaping and being shaped by the rhythm of forest and flood. Archaeological evidence now reveals that, far from being a pristine wilderness, the Amazon nurtured complex societies that cultivated the soil, managed water, and established networks of villages spanning hundreds of kilometers. These early settlers moved with a profound understanding of the environment, constructing raised fields and fish weirs, planting crops in harmony with seasonal cycles, and leaving traces of their ingenuity in the very earth beneath the forest floor. Through the layers of sediment and charcoal, archaeologists have uncovered clues to these early societies. Circular plazas, geometric earthworks, and remnants of pottery bearing both practical and ceremonial forms. These discoveries offer a gentle insight into the lives of communities whose existence intertwined with the pulsing heartbeat of the rainforest. Each artifact, each carefully arranged mound, speaks of a people attentive to the patterns of nature, whose creativity and adaptation allowed them to thrive for centuries in a landscape often mischaracterized as inhospitable. The quiet precision of their engineering suggests an intimate dialogue with the land, one of observation, respect, and patient stewardship. Long before myth and legend would rise to color the imagination of explorers, these Amazonian societies shaped a civilization hidden beneath the thick green canopy. They cultivated manioc, maize, and cacao, carefully rotating fields to preserve soil fertility. They built networks of trails and waterways, facilitating both trade and cultural exchange. In this delicate balance, the forest became both a provider and a guardian, teaching the early inhabitants the art of coexistence. Through this lens, the Amazon emerges not merely as a backdrop to human activity, but as an active partner in shaping social and cultural life. Calm discoveries surface in the small details. The uniformity of earthen mounds indicating communal planning, the presence of sophisticated fishing techniques adapted to seasonal flooding, and the traces of ceremonial spaces hinting at spiritual reflection embedded in daily life. Each finding whispers the story of humanity learning to live not in opposition to nature, but in dialogue with it. In these quiet archaeological traces, one can almost hear the echo of footsteps along forest trails, the ripple of canoes across placid waters, and the murmur of communities attuned to the cycles of growth and decay. It is here, in this ancient landscape, that the seeds of later legends were planted. The Amazon's hidden complexity, a patchwork of agriculture, habitation, and ritual, set the stage for stories of vast cities and abundant wealth that would captivate explorers centuries later. Yet beneath the myths, the reality was equally compelling. A sophisticated, sustainable civilization flourishing silently under the shelter of the trees. This is the Amazon before maps, before swords, before the distant call of fortune seekers. A living, breathing testament to human curiosity and ingenuity. As we move through time, the subtle pulse of these ancient societies guides us toward the first whispers of legend, the beginnings of stories that would entwine imagination and ambition. The rivers, fertile plains, and shadowed forest paths were more than geography. They were the canvas upon which humans first painted the earliest chapters of the lost city of Z. And as the rivers shaped life and life shaped the land, so too did these early people plant the seeds of wonder that would echo across centuries, waiting for explorers to follow the quiet call of the forest. Could a city of unimaginable wealth truly exist beyond the horizon of the known world? For centuries, such a question stirred the hearts and imaginations of those who dared to dream beyond the edges of maps. Among the dense forests and winding rivers of the Amazon, stories of a hidden city, abundant with gold, emeralds, and unimaginable treasures, had circulated long before European eyes reached the continent. These were not merely tales of material wealth. They were stories imbued with the spirit of the land itself, passed down through generations of indigenous peoples who understood the forest as both a home and a sacred realm. Early European explorers, encountering these oral traditions, often interpreted them through their own lenses of ambition and desire. Reports of El Dorado, the Gilded King, and of cities gleaming with gold, reached Europe as tantalizing fragments of a world unknown. These accounts, carried in letters and chronicles, transformed simple stories of ritual and reverence into myths of immense treasure, inspiring expeditions that would venture ever deeper into the forest. Yet behind the embellishments lay kernels of truth. Complex societies had flourished along the rivers, cultivating the land, building settlements, and creating artifacts whose beauty and craftsmanship would have seemed almost magical to outsiders. For the indigenous peoples, the stories of wealth were intertwined with spiritual and cultural significance. Gold was not merely currency or ornament. It symbolized the sun, the sacred, and the connection between the material and spiritual worlds. Rituals of offering and ceremonial practice celebrated these connections, often taking place in riverine plazas, shrines, or atop earthen mounds. In these spaces, the forest itself became a participant in human imagination, a silent witness to both devotion and daily life. The oral traditions preserved these layers of meaning, blending history, memory, and metaphor in ways that allowed the forest to hold its secrets while nurturing wonder. The myth of the lost city of Z emerged from this interplay of imagination and observation. Explorers such as Sir Walter Raleigh and later Percy Fawcett were captivated not simply by the promise of gold, but by the possibility of discovering a civilization that had harmonized with the forest in ways that Europeans had scarcely imagined. Each tale of gleaming streets and ceremonial plazas was rooted, often subtly, in real human achievement: the sophisticated agriculture, the earthworks, the networks of villages quietly thriving in the canopy's shadow. Calm discovery lies in recognizing that these legends were reflections, sometimes distorted, of actual human ingenuity and resilience. As the centuries passed, the stories evolved, weaving together indigenous knowledge, European interpretation, and the human tendency to imagine the impossible. Cartographers added cities to maps where none had been seen. Adventurers organized expeditions into the uncharted interior, guided more by hope than certainty. The Amazon, immense and protective, allowed these myths to flourish. For those who ventured into its depths, each river bend, each clearing, hinted at possibilities both tangible and imagined. Explorers would later speak of glimmers in the distance, of ruins glimpsed through mist, of sounds carried by the wind, subtle reminders that the forest itself seemed to respond to the human yearning for discovery. Gentle insights emerge when we consider the forest as a repository of both fact and story. The narratives of wealth and civilization were not empty fantasies but echoes of societies whose complexity had long been overlooked. Oral traditions, sacred spaces, and carefully tended lands formed a tapestry that Europeans could glimpse only partially, and often through a lens of expectation. In understanding this, we see that the legend of Z is as much about human curiosity and imagination as it is about gold or stone. It teaches us that stories can preserve history, convey values, and inspire journeys that last centuries. These whispered stories inspired explorers to venture ever deeper into the green heart of the continent. They prompted daring journeys, meticulous maps, and patient observation, blending ambition with reverence. The myth and the forest, the imagined city and the real settlements, intertwined to create a quiet, enduring fascination that continues to capture minds today. In this convergence of memory, imagination, and human endeavor, the lost city of Z was no longer just a tale of gold. It became a symbol of humanity's longing to understand, to uncover, and to wonder. A quiet reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is as much a journey of the heart as it is of the mind. What draws a human soul to the unknown, even when every path threatens peril? For centuries, the vast, untamed Amazon lured explorers whose curiosity outweighed the very real dangers of disease, treacherous rivers, and the dense forest that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Beginning in the early 16th century, Spanish and Portuguese expeditions ventured into this green labyrinth, guided by maps that were often incomplete, legends that whispered of wealth and cities, and an enduring human desire to glimpse what had remained hidden for so long. Each step forward required patience, observation, and a humility that the forest would not easily grant. The early incursions were not gentle affairs. European parties faced relentless challenges. Tropical fevers, malarial swamps, and sudden, torrential rains that transformed rivers into torrents. Supplies dwindled quickly, and navigating the labyrinthine waterways demanded careful calculation, a skill often honed with the guidance of indigenous peoples. Yet, despite these hardships, these explorers pressed onward, drawn by the tantalizing stories of El Dorado and the whispered promises of civilizations unseen. Their journals describe not only exhaustion and disease but also moments of quiet wonder. A river bending with unusual grace, a bird whose song seemed to herald new possibilities, a clearing that offered a rare glimpse of sun-dappled land amidst the thick canopy. Encounters with native communities were equally profound and complex. Indigenous peoples lived in harmony with the forest, their knowledge of rivers, plants, and animals forming the foundation of daily survival. For European explorers, these interactions offered guidance and insight, as well as occasional tension. Language barriers and differing worldviews could create misunderstandings, yet many expeditions were aided by the willingness of local communities to share their wisdom. Through these exchanges, explorers learned which plants could heal, which paths were safe, and where settlements might be found, knowledge that would prove indispensable to continued journeys into the interior. Amid these first encounters, subtle discoveries emerged. The sophistication of indigenous agriculture became apparent. Cultivated fields ingeniously raised above seasonal flood levels, channels designed to manage water flow, and the careful rotation of crops that preserved fertility. Artifacts, from ceramics to woven goods, revealed a level of craftsmanship that hinted at cultural richness long unrecognized by outsiders. These gentle revelations offered a quiet, contemplative counterpoint to the explorers' more sensational ambitions, reminding them, and now us, that the forest had nurtured complexity and innovation for centuries before European arrival. Navigating the Amazon was not simply a physical challenge. It demanded psychological endurance as well. Dense fogs could erase the trail, animal sounds unfamiliar and sometimes alarming, and the sheer scale of the forest imposed a humility few were prepared for. Observing the forest with care, many explorers began to understand that its apparent chaos was, in fact, a network of interconnected systems. Rivers serving as highways, forests as protective shelters, and seasonal changes guiding movement and agriculture. In this quiet study of nature, there were discoveries of a different kind, not gold or cities, but an understanding of resilience, adaptation, and the delicate balance between humanity and environment. European incursions also illuminated the ways in which memory and myth guided human perception. Each explorer's journal mingled fact and conjecture, mapping the known while imagining the unknown. Reports described glimpses of settlements, remnants of earthworks, and the vast potential for wealth, some of it exaggerated by hope, some rooted in observable evidence. Over time, these early records laid the foundation for the enduring mystery of Z, a city that existed both in the reality of human settlements and in the collective imagination of those who had yet to find it. In these writings, one senses the rhythm of discovery tempered by caution, the interplay of curiosity and respect for the forest that could easily overwhelm the unprepared. And so, the stage was set. A land of endless green, whispering promises of discovery to those daring enough to listen. The Amazon, in its vastness and complexity, had become both a challenge and a guide, shaping the journeys of explorers who would follow its rivers deeper than any map had shown. It nurtured stories of human ingenuity, perseverance, and wonder, while preserving the quiet mysteries that would inspire generations to come. In the interplay between myth and reality, between curiosity and caution, the first encounters established a template for all that followed. A delicate balance between ambition and reverence, a journey measured not only in miles traveled but in the lessons the forest quietly imparted. What compels a mapmaker to chart the uncharted, when the land itself seems alive and resisting? In the 19th century, as Europe matured in science and geography, explorers turned their attention to the vast, enigmatic Amazon, seeking to reconcile legend with knowledge. Among these adventurers, Colonel Percy Fawcett emerged as a figure whose determination combined methodical observation with a quiet reverence for the unknown. Unlike earlier explorers driven solely by wealth or conquest, Fawcett approached the forest with careful preparation, scientific curiosity, and a patience that allowed him to see what had often been overlooked. Fawcett's expeditions were guided not only by maps and instruments but by the stories and expertise of the indigenous peoples he encountered. These communities had long navigated the rivers, forests, and floodplains with a knowledge honed over generations. They pointed the way through hidden channels, identified plants of nourishment and medicine, and offered subtle warnings about the perils that lay ahead. For Fawcett, each encounter was an opportunity to learn, a lesson in humility, observation, and the understanding that the forest demanded respect as much as courage. He recorded not only the locations of settlements and natural features, but also the rhythms of life that gave the land its enduring pulse. The mapping efforts themselves were rigorous and exacting. Fawcett employed surveying instruments to chart rivers, measure elevations, and triangulate positions in a terrain where landmarks could vanish behind foliage or turn with the meander of a river. The process required patience. Days of careful measurement interrupted by storms, swarms of insects, and the constant challenge of travel through dense vegetation. Yet it was in this methodical work that Fawcett discovered the forest's hidden patterns. Rivers did not simply flow. They connected settlements, shaped ecosystems, and hinted at the agricultural and social networks of the people who had lived there long before Europeans arrived. Among the quiet discoveries that emerged was the realization that the Amazon was not an impenetrable wilderness, but a living landscape shaped by centuries of human ingenuity. Fawcett observed earthworks, raised fields, and remnants of fortified villages, recognizing them as evidence of sophisticated social organization. These insights quietly challenged prevailing assumptions that the forest had always been wild and untamed. Through his careful documentation, Fawcett began to see the possibility of a lost civilization, not merely a city of gold, but a society that had harmonized with the forest in ways that deserved both study and respect. Early encounters with local communities also revealed cultural and linguistic richness that complemented the physical mapping. Fawcett listened to oral histories, recorded native place names, and observed customs that illuminated patterns of settlement, trade, and ritual. Each piece of information allowed him to create maps that were more than lines and symbols. They became layered records of human life intertwined with geography. These quiet insights rewarded patient observation and demonstrated that exploration is as much about understanding people and culture as it is about measuring rivers or marking trees. Yet the forest remained a formidable teacher. Fawcett often described moments when the canopy itself seemed to press close, obscuring the sun, and when the rivers twisted in ways that defied expectation. Even with scientific instruments in hand, he faced uncertainty, improvising routes and relying on both intuition and the guidance of his companions. It was in this delicate dance between knowledge and the unknown that the heart of his work lay. The act of mapping became a meditation, a dialogue with a land that concealed as much as it revealed. Each map line traced brought Fawcett closer and yet deeper into mystery. As he recorded rivers, hills, and settlements, he also followed the faint traces of legend. Stories of cities hidden beneath the green canopy, of communities whose complexity had been erased from memory. The forest, ever patient, allowed glimpses but withheld full revelation. And in this interplay of observation, calculation, and imagination, Fawcett's expeditions became more than a quest for Z. They were a study in perseverance, curiosity, and the quiet courage required to approach the unknown with respect and wonder. Through these journeys, he invited others to consider not just what lay ahead, but the profound lessons that the Amazon itself might offer to those willing to move slowly, to observe and to listen. Could a city hidden beneath the forest canopy exist not only in geography but in imagination? For Colonel Percy Fawcett, the idea of Z transcended the simple pursuit of maps or treasure. His writings reveal a mind captivated equally by scientific rigor and the lure of mystery. Z was not merely a destination. It was a concept, a thread weaving together the known and the unknown, the tangible landscape of rivers and settlements and the intangible landscapes of legend and human aspiration. In this delicate balance, Fawcett's obsession reflected both a disciplined curiosity and a deeply personal yearning to reconcile myth with reality. Fawcett approached the Amazon as both an explorer and a scholar. His journals and letters record meticulous observations, measurements of river depths, notes on soil fertility, descriptions of flora and fauna, and careful sketches of indigenous villages. Yet interwoven with these empirical records were reflections on the philosophical significance of discovery. To him, Z represented the possibility of uncovering a civilization that had mastered a symbiosis with its environment, a society that might teach the modern world humility, patience, and the quiet ingenuity required to thrive in harmony with nature. Each observation, no matter how small, was part of a larger meditation on human potential. The allure of Z was amplified by the narratives Fawcett absorbed from indigenous communities, European reports, and the echoes of older myths like El Dorado. These stories created a layered tapestry, one that combined tangible evidence with imagination, memory, and hope. Fawcett recognized that legend and reality were not mutually exclusive. He believed that oral histories, the traces of settlements, and the carefully managed landscapes of the Amazon were fragments of a truth that had been obscured by time. To follow Z was to honor both the past and the possibilities that lay ahead, an endeavor that required a sensitivity to the forest's quiet lessons as much as to its geographic coordinates. This quiet quest also reflected the tensions of the age. Fawcett lived at the intersection of colonial ambition and scientific exploration. European powers were mapping and claiming distant lands, yet he sought knowledge over conquest. His approach was marked by respect for local communities, attention to natural processes, and an insistence on accuracy. At the same time, the broader cultural milieu celebrated discovery and adventure, and Fawcett's narrative was inevitably colored by the era's fascination with unexplored territories and lost civilizations. The result was a synthesis of observation, imagination, and personal philosophy, a pursuit that transformed a physical journey into an ethical and intellectual one. Calm discoveries emerge from examining his process. In his careful tracking of rivers and tributaries, Fawcett revealed the hidden logic of the Amazon's labyrinthine waterways. In noting patterns of settlement, he glimpsed evidence of social organization and agricultural ingenuity that challenged the assumption of an untamed wilderness. And in reflecting on the stories shared by native communities, he recognized that the forest was not merely an obstacle to human ambition, but a partner in shaping culture and memory. These insights were neither dramatic nor sensational. They were quiet, contemplative realizations that deepened both his understanding and his sense of wonder. Fawcett's obsession with Z was also an internal journey. Each map he drafted, each encounter he recorded, each hypothesis he considered was an exercise in patience, resilience, and imagination. He navigated the tension between doubt and belief, between empirical evidence and the magnetic pull of legend. In doing so, he illuminated a fundamental truth about exploration. It is as much a journey of the mind and spirit as of body and compass. The forest, with its layers of life and history, demanded humility, careful attention, and a willingness to accept that some answers would remain elusive. As Fawcett followed ancient hints, the forest itself seemed to guide him toward its heart. The traces of past civilizations, the patterns of waterways, and the stories preserved in memory and land created a subtle map, one drawn not only in ink and instrument, but in observation, reflection, and imagination. In this interplay of knowledge and myth, the pursuit of Z became more than a search for a city. It became a meditation on human curiosity, a lesson in reverence for both history and the natural world, and a quiet testament to the enduring power of stories that live between the lines of maps and the folds of memory. When lines drawn on paper meet the endless wilderness, which will yield first, truth or legend? In the 19th century, cartography was both a science and an art, and the Amazon presented a challenge that demanded every tool of observation, calculation, and imagination. Explorers like Colonel Percy Fawcett approached the task with meticulous care, tracing rivers, measuring elevations, and triangulating points where dense foliage obscured familiar landmarks. Yet for all the precision of instruments, the forest resisted finality, offering glimpses of clarity one moment and erasing them the next. In this space between knowledge and mystery, the maps became living documents, at once guides, hypotheses, and invitations to wonder. The technical efforts of the time required extraordinary patience. Surveyors used sextants, barometers, and compasses to establish positions, often under grueling conditions of humidity, insects, and unrelenting sun. Distances were measured along rivers, sometimes by canoe, sometimes by foot, while vegetation impeded progress and altered perception of scale. Each correction, each observation, added layers of reliability, yet the sheer scale of the Amazon meant that large areas remained speculative. It was within this uncertainty that imagination filled the gaps. A river might bend where no one had yet walked, a clearing might hide the ruins of a lost settlement, and a tributary could suggest connections to distant communities. Calm discoveries lie in these details. Observers noted patterns of water flow that hinted at human modification, evidence of earthen mounds, and clusters of soil enriched through generations of cultivation. Even when settlements could not be seen directly, their imprint on the landscape was detectable, subtle elevations, channels, and clearings revealing centuries of interaction between humans and environment. These traces suggested that the Amazon was not simply a wild expanse, but a landscape sculpted by human ingenuity, waiting for careful eyes to read its hidden scripts. Speculative maps, while inherently imaginative, were grounded in observation. Fawcett and his contemporaries often combined direct measurements with local knowledge, oral histories, and historical reports. Indigenous place names were carefully recorded, and descriptions of villages, ceremonial sites, and trade routes were translated into coordinates and symbols. The process was both analytical and interpretive. A river might be drawn with precise curves, but its intersections with imagined settlements reflected hypotheses that could only be tested through exploration. Each line on the page was therefore a bridge between the measurable and the possible, between what the eye had seen and what the mind sought to understand. The coexistence of geography and conjecture shaped the narrative of Z. While empirical data suggested a network of advanced societies, legend provided the narrative fuel that motivated further exploration. Maps became more than tools for navigation. They were instruments of imagination, blending science and story. Observers could trace a river and simultaneously imagine the city beyond its bend, the plazas hidden beneath the canopy, or the wealth and complexity preserved in silence for generations. This delicate synthesis of evidence and aspiration created a rhythm in exploration, the measured steps of cartography tempered by the quiet thrill of possibility. Intellectually, this interplay teaches an enduring lesson. The Amazon resisted absolute definition, reminding explorers that knowledge is iterative and humility essential. One could measure, record, and calculate, yet the forest demanded patience, observation, and an openness to mystery. In some ways, the speculative maps themselves became artifacts, documenting not only terrain, but the evolving human relationship with the unknown. Fawcett's work illustrates that exploration is both analytical and reflective. The act of charting the land becomes inseparable from the act of imagining it, and the lines drawn on paper are as much an expression of curiosity as of precision. Cartography also revealed the broader context of Amazonian life. In tracing tributaries and pathways, Fawcett noted the distribution of settlements, agricultural patterns, and natural resources. The forest's infrastructure, rivers as highways, raised fields as evidence of environmental management, was quietly encoded in each map. These revelations reinforced the idea that the legends of cities were not purely fanciful, but rooted in the evidence of human ingenuity. Each careful survey, each hypothesis mapped, brought explorers closer to understanding the patterns that had shaped life in the Amazon long before European arrival. With each map, the city of Z became more than a myth, it became a mission. The act of drawing and redrawing, of refining and hypothesizing, transformed exploration into a dialogue between human intellect and the forest's enduring mysteries. Lines on paper represented pathways into the unknown, while the forest tested the limits of observation, patience, and imagination. In this balance, the search for Z was elevated beyond gold or fame. It became a pursuit of understanding, a meditation on the interaction between culture, nature, and the power of human curiosity. Through cartography, explorers glimpsed not just what lay ahead, but the deeper truths of human endeavor, that wonder, careful observation, and respect for the unknown can coexist, quietly guiding the journey into the heart of mystery. How does one listen to a forest when every step echoes through centuries of silence? For Colonel Percy Fawcett, the Amazon was more than a landscape to be crossed. It was a living entity, demanding patience, attention, and reverence. His early expeditions in the 1900s were measured, deliberate, and guided by both scientific rigor and a deep curiosity about the unknown. Unlike explorers who charged ahead in search of immediate fame or fortune, Fawcett moved slowly, attuned to the rhythm of the jungle, aware that every observation could yield insight and every misstep could prove costly. Fawcett's methods reflected a careful balance between discipline and adaptability. He meticulously documented the forest, noting river depths, cataloging flora and fauna, recording soil conditions, and sketching settlements or earthworks encountered along the way. Each measurement was both practical and reflective, a means of understanding the forest's structure while respecting its subtleties. Time in the Amazon unfolded differently than in Europe. Days were measured in the rise and fall of the sun through dense canopy, the shift of tides in winding rivers, and the whisper of animals hidden among leaves. Fawcett's journals reveal a mindfulness rare in exploration. Every detail observed, every behavior noted, contributed to a slowly building comprehension of the landscape. Crucial to these expeditions were the indigenous guides who accompanied him. Their knowledge of trails, river currents, and seasonal variations was indispensable, providing insights that instruments alone could not capture. Fawcett listened carefully, learning to interpret subtle signs. A broken branch indicating a nearby crossing, the tracks of tapirs hinting at water sources, or patterns of birds that revealed changes in weather. These guides also taught him that the forest was not simply a setting, but a partner in survival, shaping movement, decision-making, and even the pace at which exploration could proceed. Their wisdom was a quiet thread weaving through each journey, offering both safety and deeper understanding. The rhythm of jungle life imposed its own tempo. Canoes moved slowly along meandering rivers, portages were measured in sweat and care, and nights demanded vigilance against insects, predators, and sudden storms. Yet within these constraints, there were moments of calm discovery. Observing the reflections of clouds in a river's surface, noting the intricate construction of a nest, or tracing the contours of an earthen mound hinting at human presence centuries earlier. These observations revealed a world both alive and layered with history, where each element of the landscape, river, tree, or mound, was part of a larger narrative shaped by generations of human and natural activity. Fawcett's initial findings, though modest by later standards, offered profound insights. Evidence of organized settlements emerged along tributaries. Raised fields adapted to flooding, clusters of dwellings suggesting coordinated planning, and pathways linking villages in networks invisible from afar but discernible in careful study. The forest, once thought impenetrable and chaotic, began to reveal patterns of habitation, agriculture, and ritual that reflected centuries of human adaptation. These discoveries, while subtle and often overlooked by contemporaries, validated Fawcett's belief that the Amazon had nurtured complex societies that could have inspired the legends of a golden city hidden within the canopy. Calm discoveries also extended to cultural understanding. Through patient observation and respectful engagement, Fawcett documented the lives, customs, and practices of indigenous communities. He noted methods of fishing, cultivation, and construction, as well as ceremonies and stories preserved in oral tradition. Each encounter deepened his appreciation for human resilience and ingenuity in the forest. Unlike many explorers who sought dominion over their surroundings, Fawcett was attuned to the knowledge embedded in the land and the communities that had learned to live within it. His approach fostered a quiet reciprocity. The forest and its inhabitants offered guidance, while he recorded and interpreted with care and attention. The challenges, however, were unrelenting. Disease, hunger, treacherous river currents, and unpredictable weather tested both endurance and spirit. Even with guidance and preparation, the forest demanded vigilance, humility, and patience. Fawcett's journals often reflect this delicate balance. The frustration of days spent retracing paths, the exhilaration of discovering evidence of settlement, and the deep, contemplative understanding that the forest's secrets could not be forced but must be coaxed through observation and respect. In this way, exploration became less about conquest and more about dialogue, a measured engagement with the unknown that honored both human curiosity and the wisdom of the land. With every river crossed, Fawcett drew nearer to a vision that had haunted him for decades. The lost city of Z was no longer simply an abstract idea. It was an evolving hypothesis, informed by observation, indigenous knowledge, and the patterns that the forest slowly revealed. Each step, each journal entry, and each map line brought him closer to understanding what had previously been only a whisper in legend. In navigating the rhythm, challenges, and quiet lessons of the Amazon, Fawcett's expeditions became a meditation on endurance, curiosity, and the profound, patient art of discovery. A journey that was as much about listening to the forest as it was about finding a city. What can be learned from people whose lives flow in harmony with a world we barely understand? As Percy Fawcett and his companions ventured deeper into the Amazon, they encountered communities whose presence had remained largely invisible to outsiders. These encounters were not simply moments of curiosity or documentation. They were profound exchanges that revealed the quiet ingenuity, resilience, and cultural richness of societies that had flourished for centuries within the forest's embrace. For explorers attuned to observation and reflection, these meetings offered lessons in humility, patience, and the delicate ethics of engagement. Many of the tribes they met lived in intimate balance with the land. Settlements were often small, strategically positioned along rivers or clearings, with dwellings constructed from locally sourced materials that reflected both utility and artistry. Raised pathways, canals, and agricultural plots demonstrated careful management of water and soil, while tools and craftwork spoke of an enduring knowledge of the environment. Fawcett's journals note the elegance of these systems, recognizing that survival in the Amazon required not brute force, but attentiveness and adaptation, a quiet dialogue with the rhythms of the forest. The cultural exchanges were subtle but profound. Fawcett and his companions observed fishing techniques, methods of cultivating crops, and strategies for hunting and gathering. They witnessed ceremonies that blended daily life with spiritual reflection, offering insight into the values and beliefs that structured these communities. In return, the explorers shared knowledge of navigation, maps, and observations from the wider world, creating moments of reciprocal understanding. These encounters were not always easy. Language barriers, differing worldviews, and the natural caution of tribes towards strangers required patience and sensitivity. Yet, when approached with respect, the forest revealed its human tapestry, and each exchange became a quiet testament to the richness of life previously hidden from the gaze of outsiders. Calm discoveries arose in the details. Observing the seasonal movements of people along rivers, Fawcett discerned patterns of trade and resource management. Studying ritual spaces and ceremonial objects, he glimpsed the intangible threads that connected belief, environment, and community cohesion. Even in moments that might have seemed mundane, a canoe gliding silently down a tributary, or a village child tending a garden, there was evidence of profound knowledge and adaptability. These observations reminded explorers that human ingenuity takes countless forms, often invisible to those accustomed to urban or industrial life. Fawcett's reflections also reveal a growing awareness of ethical responsibility. To study these communities without disrupting them, to document without imposing, and to observe without exploitation, became guiding principles in his journeys. The forest demanded a quiet attentiveness, where knowledge was earned through patience and trust rather than extraction or conquest. By embracing this ethos, Fawcett and his companions were able to learn deeply, gaining understanding not just of survival techniques, but of the philosophies and worldviews that had enabled these societies to flourish for generations. The encounters also underscored the interconnection between culture and environment. Villages were often positioned to maximize access to resources without overexploiting them. Agricultural plots were rotated or elevated to prevent soil depletion, and ceremonial sites honored both spirits and cycles of nature. In observing these systems, the explorers were reminded that human life can coexist harmoniously with the natural world, and that the Amazon's apparent wilderness is in fact a landscape shaped by centuries of careful stewardship. This quiet lesson in balance and sustainability resonated deeply with Fawcett, reinforcing his conviction that the lost city of Z, if it existed, would not be an isolated fortress of wealth, but a civilization attuned to the rhythms of the forest. As the explorers pressed on, every step became a dialogue between curiosity and caution. Each encounter required attentiveness, empathy, and a recognition that the forest held knowledge that could not be rushed or forced. Observing the intricacies of daily life, recording the subtleties of language and custom, and learning the pathways of rivers and trails, Fawcett's expeditions transformed from mere journeys of discovery into profound exercises in listening and reflection. The Amazon was no longer an anonymous wilderness. It was a repository of human experience, culture, and wisdom, patiently awaiting those willing to observe with care and respect. Through these encounters, the forest slowly revealed its lessons. The explorers came to understand that the journey was not simply toward a hidden city, but toward an appreciation of human adaptability, resilience, and harmony with nature. Each village, each ceremonial space, each interaction offered insights into a world shaped by centuries of observation, trial, and understanding. In this quiet exchange, discovery was measured not in conquest or possession, but in understanding, reverence, and the gentle accumulation of knowledge. A slow unfolding of both landscape and human spirit that would guide every step deeper into the heart of the Amazon. Could the whispers of the past emerge from the very soil beneath our feet? As Percy Fawcett delved further into the Amazon, he began to notice subtle but compelling signs that the forest, long thought untamed, had once been shaped by human hands. These discoveries were quiet, often overlooked at first glance. Raised fields that defied seasonal floods, earthworks that hinted at organized settlement, and soil enriched in patterns suggesting careful cultivation. Each observation added weight to the possibility that the legendary city of Z, far from being mere myth, was rooted in the tangible reality of pre-Columbian achievement. Raised fields, in particular, captured Fawcett's attention. Ingeniously constructed above flood levels, these plots allowed crops to survive the Amazon's seasonal inundations, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of hydrology and agriculture. The geometric arrangement of these fields suggested planning and coordination, hinting at social structures capable of organizing labor across extended areas. Unlike simple gardens or scattered plots, these elevated platforms were evidence of a deliberate strategy, blending utility with environmental harmony. Fawcett recognized that such systems were not accidental. They reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge, observation, and refinement. Earthworks and mounds provided further clues. Small elevations and terraced areas, visible even through dense vegetation, indicated settlements that had endured and evolved over generations. Some mounds appeared ceremonial, others practical, yet all suggested a society with defined spaces for governance, ritual, and domestic life. Fawcett's careful sketches and notes recorded the dimensions, orientation, and placement of these features, revealing a pattern of planning that aligned with the topography and the flow of rivers. The forest, once assumed to be an empty expanse, was now beginning to reveal a hidden network of human habitation, a civilization embedded in the landscape itself. Subtle artifacts, too, provided quiet evidence of culture. Pieces of pottery, fragments of woven material, and simple tools indicated craftsmanship and continuity. While these discoveries were often small and scattered, They contributed to a larger picture of a society capable of sustaining itself over centuries, adapting to environmental pressures without losing cohesion or ingenuity. Fawcett's observations, though limited by the technology of his time, captured the delicate balance between human activity and the natural world, a balance that allowed communities to thrive without overwhelming the forest's delicate ecology. This growing body of evidence created a tension between legend and observation. The stories of golden plazas, sprawling cities, unimaginable wealth, were often dismissed as exaggeration. Yet the tangible traces Fawcett recorded suggested that a complex society had existed, and that its memory had been preserved in both landscape and oral tradition. The challenge lay in interpretation, how to distinguish historical fact from myth, and how to reconcile the extraordinary expectations inspired by legend with the subtler, but no less remarkable reality of human ingenuity. In this tension, Fawcett found both inspiration and humility. He noted, for example, that the layout of certain earthworks suggested not only practical planning but symbolic intention. The alignment of mounds, pathways, and clearings hinted at ritual or ceremonial significance, integrating the spiritual with the everyday. The forest, in its quiet resilience, had preserved these structures, allowing insight into a worldview that connected people, land, and cosmos. Fawcett's sketches and notes reveal an observer attuned to these patterns, aware that each mound or terrace was a silent testimony to human creativity and endurance. Calm discoveries extended beyond the physical evidence. The forest itself became a lens through which to read the past. Observing the distribution of fertile soils, the natural flow of water, and the placement of villages along tributaries, Fawcett began to discern the logic of settlement and agriculture. These insights suggested a level of organization that challenged contemporary assumptions about Amazonian peoples, showing that the forest had not merely sheltered humanity, but been actively shaped by its ingenuity. In this realization, the myth of became more than a tale of gold. It was a story of human adaptability, social coordination, and a deep connection to the environment. Fawcett's reflections also reveal a broader philosophical dimension. The traces of civilization reminded him that human history is often layered, hidden beneath time, vegetation, and memory. What appears as wilderness today may once have been the site of sophisticated societies, thriving through knowledge, labor, and observation. In this quiet interplay between myth and evidence, between story and soil, Fawcett found a meditation on history itself, that the past leaves subtle signatures, waiting for attentive eyes and patient curiosity to uncover them. These traces suggested that was not just a story, but a memory waiting to be found. Each mound, raised field, and artifact whispered of lives shaped by ingenuity, adaptation, and collaboration. The forest, long assumed to be impenetrable and timeless, had in fact preserved a record of human achievement, a civilization intertwined with its environment, whose legacy endured in soil, water, and memory. Fawcett's observations encouraged a reimagining of the Amazon, not as an empty wilderness, but as a landscape shaped by people, preserved through ingenuity, and capable of inspiring generations of explorers, scholars, and dreamers. In following these quiet traces, the journey became more than the search for a city. It became an exploration of human resilience, creativity, and the subtle power of memory embedded in landscape. The whispers of the past, emerging from beneath centuries of forest growth, offered lessons in observation, humility, and wonder. A reminder that discovery is often measured not in treasures unearthed, but in the understanding quietly gained from what endures in silence. What quiet wisdom governs a people whose lives follow the pulse of river and forest? Along the tributaries of the Amazon, indigenous communities developed social systems shaped by centuries of observation, cooperation, and intimate knowledge of their environment. Leadership was often distributed and fluid, rooted less in hierarchy and more in communal consensus. Decisions were made in councils, guided by the voices of elders, hunters, and those whose experience lent insight into the needs of both people and land. In this rhythm of governance, power was not an assertion over others, but a responsibility toward collective well-being. Settlements were organized with practicality and social harmony in mind. Villages often clustered along riverbanks, with dwellings arranged to optimize safety, access to water, and seasonal agricultural cycles. Each household contributed to communal tasks, cultivating crops, constructing paths, managing water channels, and maintaining shelters. Roles were often flexible, shaped by skill, age, and circumstance, reflecting a dynamic understanding of contribution and leadership. This approach fostered resilience, allowing communities to adapt to seasonal floods, resource fluctuations, and the occasional intrusion of outsiders without fracturing social cohesion. Leadership within these societies was frequently symbolic as well as functional. Chiefs or headmen acted as mediators and guides, their authority reinforced by wisdom, experience, and a deep understanding of the forest. Elders held particular sway, sharing stories, rituals, and knowledge that connected present actions with ancestral memory. Decisions were rarely dictated from a single seat of power. Instead, governance emerged organically from dialogue, reflection, and collective agreement. In observing these patterns, one sees a society attuned not only to practical needs but to the subtle balance between people and their environment, a form of organization that nurtures both human and ecological well-being. The rhythm of daily life mirrored this governance. Time was measured by the river's rise and fall, the sun's journey across the sky, and the cycles of planting and harvest. Festivals, communal workdays, and ritual observances punctuated ordinary life, reinforcing social bonds and shared responsibility. Young members of the community learned through participation, observation, and gentle instruction, absorbing the values, techniques, and rhythms that would sustain them throughout their lives. Leadership was thus not a distant abstraction, but a living, participatory force embedded in the routines and interactions of the village. Calm discoveries emerge in these patterns of social organization. Observers like Percy Fawcett noted how cooperation and mutual support allowed communities to thrive in environments that outsiders often perceived as hostile. Pathways were maintained collectively, water channels managed communally, and knowledge of edible and medicinal plants was shared freely. The forest was both partner and teacher, guiding behavior, providing resources, and shaping decision-making. In this way, governance was inseparable from the environment, reflecting a nuanced understanding of interdependence that modern observers might describe as ecological intelligence. Trade and communication extended these networks beyond single villages. Canoes glided along rivers carrying goods, ideas, and ceremonial objects, connecting communities in patterns that were as much social as economic. Leadership adapted to these broader interactions. Emissaries and mediators ensured that conflicts were resolved, alliances maintained, and knowledge exchanged. In these quiet systems of governance, one sees an elegant orchestration of relationships, human, environmental, and spiritual, sustained by respect, observation, and patience rather than coercion or force. These structures of authority and cooperation laid the groundwork for cultural and spiritual life. Governance was not separate from belief. It was intertwined with an understanding of the forest's rhythms, the river's pulse, and the cycles of the sky. Decisions about planting, hunting, or settlement were informed not only by practical concerns but by ceremonial guidance, ancestral memory, and ethical reflection. The forest, in this sense, was both a stage and a teacher. Communities learned to move in harmony with its cycles, to respect its limits, and to recognize the consequences of imbalance. Through this lens, governance appears less as an imposition and more as a form of attunement. The quiet authority of elders, the deliberative councils, and the collective labor of the village all reflect a philosophy of stewardship and harmony. Authority was exercised gently, and responsibility was shared, ensuring that the needs of the many were balanced with the capabilities of the few. In observing these systems, one gains a sense of human life conducted in dialogue with environment and community, a rhythm that allowed both survival and reflection to coexist. As human societies took shape, so too did their beliefs, intertwined with river, tree, and sky. Leadership, decision-making, and community life were inseparable from the spiritual and cosmological frameworks that guided understanding of the world. Chiefs and elders acted not only as organizers but as interpreters of ancestral wisdom, linking daily survival with the stories, rituals, and ethical codes that sustained the social fabric. In these quiet intersections of governance and belief, one sees the foundations of civilization in the Amazon. A delicate harmony between human aspiration, ecological knowledge, and spiritual insight, quietly observed and preserved through centuries of careful practice. Could a city be hidden, not only in geography, but within the very imagination of its people? Along the winding rivers and dense forests of the Amazon, indigenous communities nurtured a spiritual life that intertwined seamlessly with the natural world. Every tree, river, and hill carried significance, and human activity was understood as part of a broader, living cosmos. These beliefs were quiet yet pervasive, guiding daily choices, shaping rituals, and offering a lens through which the world, and any legends of hidden cities, could be understood. The forest itself was central to spiritual understanding. Rivers were more than sources of sustenance. They were pathways of life and carriers of ancestral memory. Trees, with their layered canopies, were regarded as both home and teacher, offering shade, fruit, and lessons in resilience. Animals were recognized as kin, messengers, or guardians, and the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars marked time for planting, harvesting, and ceremony. In this worldview, the physical landscape was inseparable from the spiritual, and reverence for the natural world shaped ethics, community decisions, and daily practice. Ceremonial life reflected this intimate connection. Seasonal festivals, rites of passage, and communal rituals were occasions to honor the land, ancestors, and unseen forces believed to guide human life. Shamans or spiritual leaders acted as intermediaries, interpreting signs from the forest, rivers, and sky. Their guidance influenced agriculture, hunting, and settlement patterns, blending practical knowledge with spiritual insight. Observers like Fawcett noted the care with which rituals were performed, recognizing that each movement, offering, or chant was a deliberate dialogue with forces beyond immediate human perception. The cosmology of Amazonian societies was rich and layered. Myths and stories explained the origins of the rivers, the creation of the forest, and the relationships between humans and animals. These narratives were not static. They evolved with experience, observation, and reflection, serving as both history and guidance. Knowledge of these tales allowed communities to navigate the forest safely, manage resources effectively, and maintain social harmony. In essence, legend and lived experience were intertwined, creating a map of understanding that encompassed both the seen and unseen. Quiet discoveries emerged in the connection between belief and the landscape. Archaeological traces, ceremonial spaces, and oral histories suggested that legends of cities, like Z, may have been informed not only by material wealth but by spiritual significance. A clearing could serve as a ceremonial site as much as a practical village center, and patterns of raised fields might reflect cosmological principles as well as agricultural necessity. In this way, the forest itself was sacred, and the lost city might exist as much in collective imagination and spiritual memory as in physical reality. Fawcett's writings indicate his growing awareness of this perspective. He observed that explorers could map rivers, measure mounds, and record settlements, yet remain unaware of the deeper significance the land held for those who lived there. Spiritual understanding added a layer of meaning to the Amazonian landscape, connecting past and present, human action and natural rhythm. By listening, observing, and recording not only material features but practices and beliefs, Fawcett began to appreciate that the forest's mysteries were as much cultural and spiritual as they were geographic. The reverence for nature and the integration of faith into daily life also reinforced social cohesion. Rituals structured time, communal ceremonies strengthened bonds, and ethical practices governed the use of resources. Leadership and governance were inseparable from spiritual understanding. Chiefs and elders often drew upon cosmology to make decisions, ensuring that human activity remained in balance with environmental and ethical imperatives. This harmony allowed societies to thrive, leaving traces in both the physical landscape and the stories that endured across generations. In connecting spiritual landscapes to the legend of Z, one begins to see the forest as a mirror of imagination and belief. The city, whether real or symbolic, was framed within a worldview that valued balance, respect, and interconnectedness. Its existence was measured not in gold or conquest, but in harmony with land, river, and sky. Fawcett's fascination, therefore, was as much philosophical as it was empirical. He was drawn not only to the possibility of a hidden civilization, but to understanding how people had envisioned and interacted with the forest as a living, sacred space. Faith and governance guided daily life, while explorers sought evidence of human ambition beyond the known. As rivers were mapped and mounds recorded, the spiritual dimensions of settlement became increasingly apparent. The Amazon was not merely a wilderness to be conquered or charted. It was a landscape of memory, culture, and reverence. In following these rhythms, explorers glimpsed a world where belief and environment were inseparable, and where the quiet pulse of forest life shaped both society and imagination. In this interplay, the pursuit of Z was revealed to be more than a search for material wealth. It was a meditation on human creativity, the endurance of culture, and the subtle wisdom encoded in landscapes both physical and spiritual. When does a story become history, and when does history become legend? In the heart of the Amazon, memory, myth, and lived experience intertwined in ways both subtle and profound. Tales of hidden cities, rivers of gold, and ancient civilizations were preserved not in stone or parchment, but in the oral traditions of communities who had inhabited the forest for centuries. These narratives carried lessons, ethical guidance, and a sense of identity, while also fueling the imagination of distant explorers who sought to reconcile the known with the unknown. Oral tradition in Amazonian societies was a living, evolving medium. Stories of ancestors, migrations, and sacred places were passed down through generations, often with variations reflecting the perspectives of storytellers and the circumstances of the listeners. Rituals, songs, and ceremonial practices acted as mnemonic devices, embedding history into rhythm and memory. In this way, even as the landscape shifted with floods, growth, or human intervention, the essence of past settlements, practices, and experiences persisted in human consciousness. These tales were both practical and symbolic, teaching survival, social cohesion, and reverence for the environment. Myth served as a bridge between memory and imagination. The stories of a golden city of Z were not merely fantasies. They were informed by fragments of truth, the traces of settlements, raised fields, and ceremonial spaces that explorers like Percy Fawcett began to observe. Legends codified knowledge of geography, seasonal cycles, and resource management, even while elevating certain elements into extraordinary narratives. In this way, myth was not an escape from reality, but a form of understanding, a cultural lens that shaped perception, decision-making, and aspiration. Explorers approaching the Amazon were inevitably shaped by these narratives. Letters, journals, and reports reveal how myths of wealth, order, and mystery influenced both their expectations and their methodology. Fawcett, in particular, was drawn as much to the philosophical and ethical dimensions of these stories as to their material promise. He observed that legend and landscape were inseparable. The forest preserved both physical traces of human activity and the imaginative memory of civilizations long past. In studying these myths, explorers were engaging with a dual reality, one tangible, one symbolic, where each reinforced the other, guiding paths, shaping hypotheses, and framing their understanding of the unknown. Quiet discoveries emerge in the convergence of memory and myth. Certain river bends, clearings, and earthen structures seem to echo the narratives recounted by local communities. Traces of habitation aligned with stories of powerful ancestral centers or ceremonial hubs. Fawcett's recognition of this interplay, that oral tradition could encode information about geography, social organization, and agriculture, elevated his explorations beyond simple surveying. It was an exercise in listening as much as mapping, in understanding as much as observing. The forest, through both its material features and the stories it inspired, became a repository of knowledge encoded across centuries of human experience. The impact of myth on local identity was profound. Communities maintained a sense of place, belonging, and continuity through these stories. The legendary city was not just an abstract concept. It was a point of cultural reference, a symbol of endurance, ingenuity, and ancestral wisdom. Even as explorers ventured in search of tangible remains, the inhabitants themselves lived in a landscape imbued with meaning, where history and legend merged to reinforce social cohesion, ethical practice, and environmental stewardship. In this sense, the city of Z existed both in the imagination of its people and in the subtle traces left upon the forest floor. For distant explorers, myth functioned as both motivation and framework. It shaped their understanding of what to seek, how to interpret ambiguous evidence, and how to navigate an environment that resisted conventional measurement. The stories of wealth, organization, and grandeur were tempered by empirical observation, yet they never lost their influence. Fawcett's meticulous notes reveal a continual dialogue between expectation and evidence, legend and observation, imagination and rigor. The Amazon was not simply a puzzle to solve. It was a narrative landscape, and every encounter, measurement, or artifact could be read both literally and symbolically. Memory and myth also reveal the psychological dimensions of exploration. The pursuit of Z demanded patience, resilience, and a capacity to tolerate uncertainty. The city became a touchstone for hope, curiosity, and the human desire to connect with the past. Explorers were drawn to the interplay between what could be known and what could only be imagined, recognizing that the journey itself, the rhythm of travel, observation, and reflection, was as important as the ultimate discovery. In this way, myth shaped not only the physical search but the interior experience of those who dared to follow the forest's winding paths. In the interplay of myth and reality, the city of Z continued to call across the centuries. Its presence was felt in the patterns of the rivers, the alignments of mounds, and the stories passed down by communities who had lived and thrived in the forest long before outsiders arrived. Memory preserved knowledge of human ingenuity, adaptation, and spirituality, while myth amplified these insights into visions that could inspire generations of explorers. Together, they formed a quiet continuum, linking past and present, imagination and observation, legend and evidence. Through this lens, one sees that discovery is never purely material. The city of Z is as much a product of human memory, cultural imagination, and ethical reflection as it is a question of geography or archaeology. In attending to both story and soil, explorers and observers gain a deeper understanding of human experience, of the ways in which people interpret their world, and of the enduring power of narrative to shape perception, aspiration, and connection. The Amazon, with its layers of history, culture, and imagination, reminds us that the line between myth and memory is porous, and that understanding often emerges quietly, through patience, attention, and reflection. How does life unfold when every moment is guided by the pulse of water and forest? Along the serpentine rivers of the Amazon, communities shape their lives in harmony with the rhythms of the environment, cultivating a deep understanding of the cycles of rain, sun, and river flow. Pre-Columbian settlements were carefully positioned to take advantage of fertile floodplains and elevated clearings, allowing inhabitants to farm, fish, and gather resources with remarkable efficiency. Each activity, from planting to canoeing, was attuned to the land, reflecting a subtle mastery of both technique and timing. Agriculture was central to daily life. Raised fields, constructed to withstand seasonal inundations, supported crops such as manioc, maize, and sweet potatoes. These platforms were labor-intensive to build but offered predictable harvests, demonstrating a sophisticated knowledge of soil, water management, and crop rotation. Families worked collectively to maintain these fields, sharing both labor and knowledge across generations. Planting was more than subsistence. It was a practice imbued with observation, patience, and reverence for the life cycles of the forest. Fishing and hunting complemented cultivation, following seasonal rhythms that dictated availability and abundance. Fish were caught using nets, traps, and spears, while small game provided protein and materials for tools or ornamentation. Canoes glided silently along rivers at dawn, their movement almost imperceptible, allowing people to navigate efficiently while minimizing disturbance to the ecosystem. These routines were quiet yet purposeful, blending skill, patience, and attentiveness to the natural world. The rivers themselves were arteries of life, carrying not only food and water but also cultural connection and information between communities. Crafting was another pillar of Amazonian daily life. Tools, woven mats, pottery, and ceremonial objects were produced with care and functionality, often reflecting symbolic meanings as well as practical utility. Observers like Fawcett noted the elegance of these creations, recognizing that craftsmanship was intertwined with identity, social cohesion, and environmental understanding. Materials were sourced locally: clay from riverbanks, fibers from plants, wood from selectively harvested trees, illustrating a philosophy of sustainability and respect for the resources the forest provided. Trade and exchange further reinforced intercommunity bonds. Canoes transported goods, knowledge, and ceremonial objects along river networks, connecting distant settlements in a web of social and economic relationships. Surplus crops, crafted items, and raw materials moved quietly but deliberately, fostering cooperation and mutual reliance. Even in these exchanges, the environment shaped practice. Timing was dictated by river conditions, routes were chosen to follow natural currents and avoid hazards, and the seasonality of products structured the rhythm of travel. Education and socialization occurred naturally through observation, participation, and storytelling. Children learned by assisting elders, practicing skills in fishing, crafting, and agriculture, and listening to oral histories that conveyed ethics, cosmology, and survival knowledge. Knowledge transfer was holistic, blending practical skills with spiritual insight and communal values. In this way, daily life became a continuous process of learning, reflection, and adaptation, reinforcing both personal competence and community cohesion. Even leisure and cultural expression were woven into this tapestry of life. Music, dance, and ritual performance marked seasonal changes, rites of passage, and communal celebrations. Storytelling preserved memory, passed down practical lessons, and nurtured imagination. These quiet expressions reinforced identity and continuity, shaping the collective consciousness of each settlement. Observing these rhythms, one senses a life of gentle attentiveness, a balance between labor and reflection, survival and celebration, individual skill and communal harmony. Calm discoveries emerge in the interplay between environment and human adaptation. The alignment of settlements along rivers, the strategic placement of gardens, and the integration of ritual spaces into daily routines reveal a society deeply attuned to its surroundings. Each element of daily life, a fishing trip, a planting season, a communal meal, reflects an understanding of interdependence, sustainability, and the subtle negotiation between human need and environmental limits. In this perspective, the Amazon is neither empty nor wild. It is inhabited by communities whose ingenuity, observation, and rhythm transformed the forest into a living, sustaining landscape. From the pulse of daily life, patterns emerged that bound communities into a coherent whole. Agriculture, fishing, crafting, trade, education, and ritual were not isolated activities. They formed a network of practice and meaning, connecting people to one another and to the land itself. These rhythms ensured survival, nurtured identity, and preserved knowledge across generations. In observing them, explorers and scholars alike can appreciate the quiet mastery, resilience, and creativity that allowed civilizations to flourish along the rivers long before the arrival of outsiders. In this gentle unfolding of daily existence, the forest is both teacher and partner, shaping routines and guiding choices. Human life here was measured in hours of labor, cycles of growth, and the silent signals of river and canopy. It was a life of adaptation, ingenuity, and harmony, a model of survival that was as sustainable as it was elegant. The pulse of water and forest dictated not only what was possible, but what was valued. Patience, observation, respect, and the careful cultivation of both food and culture. In this way, the Amazon became a cradle of quiet civilization, where human imagination and endurance shaped and were shaped by the living landscape. Could the forest itself be a library, storing the wisdom of generations? Within the vast canopy of the Amazon, human ingenuity left subtle yet enduring traces, often intertwined with the natural world. Artistry, storytelling, and technological innovation flourished quietly, revealing communities deeply attuned to both practical survival and intellectual curiosity. The forest preserved these achievements in soil, in woven patterns, in the oral memory of its people, a testament to the sophistication that shaped life long before outsiders arrived. Art and craftsmanship reflected a fusion of utility and aesthetic sensibility. Pottery, woven textiles, and carved objects demonstrated careful attention to form, function, and symbolism. Patterns often mirrored natural motifs: the ripples of rivers, the flight of birds, or the growth of plants. Tools, containers, and ceremonial items were both functional and expressive, revealing a culture that valued observation, creativity, and the integration of knowledge into everyday life. In watching communities at work, one perceives a rhythm that blends necessity with contemplation, where skill is honed and tradition is preserved in the act of creation. Language and oral storytelling were equally vital to Amazonian societies. Tales of ancestors, river spirits, and hidden settlements were transmitted through song, recitation, and ritual performance, encoding ethical guidance, survival knowledge, and cosmological understanding. These narratives were dynamic, evolving with each retelling, yet retaining continuity across generations. Fawcett and other explorers noted that storytelling served as both education and cultural reinforcement, offering young members of the community a framework for understanding the world, their place in it, and the histories of those who came before. Stories carried information about resource management, navigation, and social cohesion, ensuring that knowledge endured in an environment where written records were rare or absent. Technological achievements underscored the intellectual sophistication of these societies. Perhaps most remarkable was the creation of terra preta, the rich, fertile black earth that transformed otherwise poor soils into productive agricultural land. Through careful layering of charcoal, organic matter, and nutrient-rich materials, communities were able to sustain long-term cultivation, supporting larger populations than would otherwise have been possible. This innovation reflected not only experimentation and observation, but a long-term vision, an understanding of ecological processes, nutrient cycles, and soil stewardship that would sustain human life for generations. Raised fields, too, exemplified ingenuity. Elevated plots ensured crops survived the seasonal floods, balancing risk with productivity. Their geometric patterns demonstrated planning, coordination, and a sophisticated grasp of hydrology. Combined with terra preta, these agricultural innovations allowed for dense, stable populations along riverbanks, reshaping the forest in subtle yet significant ways. In these accomplishments, one sees a society capable of harmonizing human ambition with environmental constraints, building permanence without domination, and learning from observation rather than imposing force. Knowledge extended beyond agriculture. Toolmaking, water management, and the careful selection of materials for dwellings and craftwork all required understanding, experimentation, and intergenerational teaching. Canoes were designed for efficiency and safety, weaving techniques produced durable fabrics, and cooking implements reflected dietary needs and available resources. Each element of daily life was an opportunity to refine skill, share expertise, and ensure continuity. The Amazon itself served as a classroom, its patterns, cycles, and resources shaping thought, innovation, and the transmission of knowledge. Calm discoveries arise in the integration of culture, technology, and environment. Patterns in pottery, arrangements of raised fields, and stories embedded in oral tradition all convey deliberate intention, observation, and reflection. Knowledge was rarely abstract. It was embodied in daily practice, communal effort, and interaction with the landscape. To observe these communities is to witness learning as a lived experience, where intelligence is measured not solely in material production, but in the ability to adapt, transmit wisdom, and sustain life in dialogue with the natural world. Language, artistry, and technological achievement were inseparable from cultural identity. Storytelling reinforced moral codes and ecological awareness. Craftwork preserved aesthetic values and symbolic meaning. Soil management and agricultural planning ensured sustenance and long-term survival. Together, these elements formed a sophisticated intellectual ecosystem in which human creativity, environmental awareness, and social cohesion coexisted in quiet harmony. For explorers like Fawcett, these signs hinted at civilizations far more advanced than many outsiders realized, challenging assumptions that complexity could only arise in urban, written cultures. The creativity of these societies hinted at civilizations yet to be fully discovered by explorers like Fawcett. Every fragment of pottery, every terrace of raised field, and every tale recounted along the river contributed to a deeper understanding of the human capacity for adaptation, imagination, and cultural continuity. The forest, rather than an obstacle, was both canvas and archive. It preserved the knowledge of generations, shaping human ingenuity and offering insights into ways of life that were both practical and profoundly thoughtful. In attending to these achievements, one sees that the Amazon was more than a wilderness. It was a landscape of intellect, culture, and reflection. Art, language, and technological insight coexisted with spiritual practice, governance, and daily subsistence, creating a coherent society capable of thriving in one of the most challenging environments on the planet. Through careful observation, empathy, and patience, explorers and scholars can uncover this richness. A quiet testament to human creativity, resilience, and the enduring wisdom embedded in the rhythm of the forest itself. How do rivers thread the lives of many into a single, flowing tapestry? Along the vast waterways of the Amazon, rivers were more than channels of water. They were the lifelines of connection, carrying people, ideas, and goods between communities scattered across hundreds of kilometers. Canoes glided silently along these natural highways, transporting crops, pottery, tools, and ceremonial objects, forging bonds that sustained both economy and culture. In this way, the forest's pulse was reflected not only in daily survival, but in networks of exchange that linked villages, riverbanks, and distant settlements. Trade was both practical and symbolic. Surpluses of manioc, maize, or fish were exchanged for goods or materials unavailable locally, while crafted items, finely woven baskets, pottery, ornaments, and tools, moved from community to community. These exchanges were not merely economic. They reinforced relationships, obligations, and mutual respect. Gifts and bartered goods often carried social meaning, serving as expressions of goodwill, alliances, or ritual participation. Through trade, communities were woven into an intricate social fabric, one in which independence was balanced with interdependence, and survival depended as much on cooperation as on skill or resourcefulness. The rivers themselves dictated patterns of interaction. Seasonal fluctuations determined timing, while currents, rapids, and tributaries shaped the routes of travel. Canoes, expertly crafted from local timber, enabled both speed and safety, reflecting a deep understanding of hydrology and material properties. Travelers read the rivers as others might read a map, noting subtle currents, identifying landmarks, and anticipating obstacles. In these journeys, observation, memory, and navigation became intertwined, turning every passage into a dialogue between human ingenuity and natural rhythm. Social connections extended beyond material exchange. Trade trips often coincided with festivals, ceremonies, or communal gatherings, where stories, knowledge and cultural practices were shared. Elders recited oral histories, children learned new skills, and rituals reinforced shared cosmology. In this way, networks of exchange were also networks of learning, imagination, and ethical instruction. Knowledge of distant communities informed decisions about alliance, conflict resolution, and resource management, fostering both curiosity and mutual understanding. Quiet discoveries emerge in the patterns of Amazonian trade. Archaeologists today trace the movement of pottery styles, agricultural techniques, and ceremonial artifacts across regions, revealing a web of influence that challenges assumptions of isolation. Communities that might seem remote were in fact engaged in complex systems of interaction, balancing self-sufficiency with interconnection. Trade encouraged innovation as well. Techniques, tools, and ideas traveled alongside goods, allowing settlements to adapt and refine practices without severing local traditions. Fawcett's observations illuminate these dynamics. He recorded encounters where distant villages shared knowledge of river navigation, planting strategies, and craft production, emphasizing the richness of these networks. The Amazon, often imagined as an empty or chaotic wilderness, was in fact structured by human presence, guided by environmental understanding and social cooperation. Rivers became living connectors, shaping the flow of life, culture, and knowledge, just as they carried canoes, goods, and messages across vast distances. Balance was central to this system. Communities maintained autonomy while participating in regional networks. Social cohesion depended on shared norms, mutual aid, and ethical obligations that regulated exchange and prevented exploitation. Leaders, elders, and mediators ensured that interactions remained fair, safe, and meaningful. In this way, independence and interdependence were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of survival, adaptation, and continuity. The forest, the river, and human ingenuity combined to produce a resilient social order that endured through generations. These networks also shaped the perceptions of outsiders. For explorers like Fawcett, encountering interconnected villages revealed a level of organization and sophistication that contrasted sharply with the idea of the Amazon as untamed or uninhabited. Trade patterns provided clues about settlement density, social hierarchy, and regional influence, hinting at civilizations far more structured and interwoven than legends alone could suggest. Each canoe, each journey, and each exchanged artifact became a thread in a larger narrative, a quiet, cumulative evidence of human ingenuity and adaptation. Trade and communication prepared the stage for more complex structures, drawing outsiders deeper into the mystery of the forest. As explorers followed rivers, mapped settlements, and recorded interactions, they glimpsed not only the material achievements of communities, but also the social, ethical, and intellectual systems that sustained them. The Amazonian rivers, in their unending flow, carried stories, wisdom, and connection. A reminder that civilization is as much about relationships and shared knowledge as it is about monuments or wealth. In following these waterways, one sees the forest as a living network, where rivers are both lifelines and storytellers. Trade was not merely an exchange of goods, but a rhythm of connection, a medium through which culture, ethics, and knowledge moved silently across space and time. Through observation, curiosity, and reflection, explorers and scholars could discern these patterns, revealing the quiet sophistication of societies long obscured by foliage and legend. The pulse of the Amazon, carried along its winding rivers, remains a testament to human adaptability, cooperation, and the subtle interweaving of community, landscape, and memory. What draws men to the forest when every path is both invitation and warning? In the 18th and 19th centuries, European explorers turned their eyes toward the vast Amazon, driven by a mixture of scientific curiosity, desire for wealth, and the allure of prestige. Maps and manuscripts were consulted and contested in libraries far from the rivers themselves, but the unknown forest demanded more than scholarship. It required patience, observation, and a willingness to engage with a landscape as dense and deliberate as any human society. Each expedition was both a journey of intellect and an encounter with the unpredictable rhythms of nature. Motivations were varied. Scientists and naturalists sought to catalog flora, fauna, and geography, hoping to bring order to the seemingly endless chaos of the jungle. Wealth and ambition drew adventurers seeking gold, precious stones, or evidence of lost cities, while national pride lent urgency to voyages that would place empires and explorers alike on the map of human achievement. Yet these pursuits were rarely purely personal. They intersected with the knowledge, guidance, and labor of the indigenous peoples whose intimate understanding of rivers, trails, and seasonal cycles was indispensable. Without their experience, outsiders often found themselves lost, ill, or at the mercy of the forest's subtle dangers. The delicate interplay between discovery and exploitation was evident from the outset. Europeans often carried preconceived notions of civilization, value, and ownership, interpreting the forest through lenses that emphasized extraction rather than coexistence. At the same time, moments of genuine curiosity and respect allowed for collaborative exploration. Journals from the period reveal admiration for indigenous skill, observations of agricultural sophistication, and appreciation for social organization. Knowledge of river currents, medicinal plants, and settlement patterns was as crucial as maps, compasses, or tools. The forest required humility and attention, rewarding those who listened as much as those who measured. Expeditions faced a series of subtle yet relentless challenges. Seasonal floods could render rivers impassable, while dense undergrowth slowed travel to a careful rhythm. Mosquito-borne illness, fever, and the hidden hazards of wildlife tested endurance and resolve. Beyond these physical trials, explorers encountered cultural and linguistic differences that demanded sensitivity, patience, and negotiation. Indigenous guides were essential not only for navigation, but for interpreting signs, mediating between communities, and advising on ethical conduct in unfamiliar territories. These interactions were often quiet, measured, and mutual. The forest and its people shaped the pace and scope of exploration as much as European ambition did. Scientific curiosity blended with imagination in these ventures. Drawings of exotic plants, descriptions of unknown species, and careful measurement of rivers coexisted with speculation about lost cities, ancient civilizations, and the possibility of Z. Observers recorded phenomena with precision, while their minds lingered on the extraordinary. Massive earthen mounds, terraces, and other subtle evidence of human modification of the landscape. Each discovery invited reflection, linking the tangible to the legendary, the empirical to the imagined. In this way, the forest acted as both a teacher and a mirror, revealing the limits of knowledge and the enduring power of wonder. Quiet discoveries unfolded amid these ambitions. Observers realized that wealth was not always material. The forest offered insight, innovation, and understanding to those willing to observe. The techniques of agriculture, settlement patterns, and social organization of Amazonian communities were lessons in adaptation, resilience, and ecological harmony. European explorers, often accustomed to imposing structures and clear hierarchies, began to recognize the subtle intelligence encoded in dispersed, flexible, and sustainable practices. The forest itself seemed to reward careful attention, teaching patience, observation, and the ethical dimensions of engagement with both people and place. Yet ambition and exploration carried risk. The lure of Z and other legendary sites encouraged risk-taking and sometimes conflict. Expeditions could be misdirected by misinterpretation, overconfidence, or the desire for fame and fortune. Disease, isolation, and misjudged terrain claimed lives, while miscommunication with local communities could escalate tensions. In these circumstances, the forest became both a proving ground and a reminder of human vulnerability, a living entity whose scale, complexity, and interdependence resisted conquest or complete understanding. As outsiders pushed deeper, the forest revealed both secrets and dangers in equal measure. Rivers concealed hidden channels, mounds hinted at human enterprise, and fertile plains suggested long-forgotten cultivation. Yet shadows, illness, and the slow rhythm of travel reminded explorers that knowledge was earned gradually, through respect and attentiveness. The Amazon demanded that ambition be tempered by humility, that curiosity be guided by ethical consideration, and that discovery be understood as an ongoing dialogue rather than a simple triumph. In reflecting on this period, one sees that European ambition was both transformative and instructive. Expeditions advanced mapping, natural history, and ethnographic knowledge, while also highlighting the ingenuity and resilience of indigenous societies. Interaction between outsiders and local communities created opportunities for learning, though often within frameworks of unequal power. The forest shaped exploration as much as explorers shaped perception, creating a complex interplay of observation, imagination, and cultural exchange that would define the search for generations to come. Through these journeys, the Amazon became a landscape of aspiration and reflection, where ambition met adaptation, curiosity met caution, and discovery was inseparable from context. Each river crossed, mound recorded, or village visited offered insight into human endeavor in the face of uncertainty. The forest's mysteries were neither conquered nor fully understood. Yet in the calm patience of exploration, Europe's explorers began to glimpse the sophistication, endurance, and cultural depth of the societies whose lands they traversed. Could belief, carefully nurtured, chart a course through the uncharted? Percy Fawcett's later expeditions into the Amazon illustrate the quiet power of conviction, the way a steadfast vision can guide both action and imagination. By the early 20th century, Fawcett had become a figure of methodical determination, blending meticulous observation with an almost reverential attention to local knowledge. His pursuit of the lost city of was not a fleeting adventure. It was a carefully considered quest, grounded in evidence, hypothesis, and the subtle hints offered by the rivers, mounds, and stories of the forest's inhabitants. Fawcett's reports and publications reveal a mind attentive to both detail and context. He meticulously recorded river courses, settlement traces, and agricultural patterns, while noting the seasonal rhythms and environmental cues that governed life in the forest. These observations were interwoven with reflections on indigenous social structures, engineering feats, and cultural practices. In his journals, one finds a delicate balance between empirical recording and thoughtful speculation. The forest was a text to be read with patience, each discovery offering insight into both human ingenuity and the mysteries still concealed beneath the canopy. As his findings accumulated, Fawcett's vision of began to resonate beyond the immediate sphere of exploration. Lectures in London and correspondence with fellow geographers, anthropologists, and mapmakers spread his theories widely, presenting as both a real possibility and a symbol of uncharted human achievement. Newspapers, journals, and public lectures carried the story to a wider audience, blending scientific curiosity with the allure of mystery. For listeners and readers, the Amazon became a stage where human perseverance met the unknown, and where the whispers of legend intersected with careful study. Scientific reports, maps, and first-hand accounts lent credibility to Fawcett's quest. While some skeptics dismissed the notion of a lost city, others were persuaded by the convergence of multiple lines of evidence. The subtle earthworks, traces of complex settlement, and oral histories of local communities. Fawcett's insistence on respectful engagement with indigenous guides, along with his methodical attention to detail, distinguished his approach from purely extractive expeditions. His narrative was one of discovery guided by collaboration, observation, and patience, rather than force or haste. The spread of Fawcett's vision also transformed the forest into a shared imaginative space. Readers and fellow explorers were invited to consider the Amazon not merely as a wilderness, but as a landscape shaped by human presence and ingenuity. The idea of became a lens through which to perceive subtle traces of pre-Columbian civilization, earthworks, raised fields, and ceremonial structures, transforming myth into a framework for inquiry. This blending of legend and evidence inspired a generation of thinkers and adventurers, fostering both curiosity and reflection, even in those who would never enter the forest themselves. Fawcett's later expeditions were marked by meticulous preparation and deep engagement with local knowledge. He recruited guides who understood river patterns, weather cycles, and terrain nuances, and he sought to minimize disruption to the communities he encountered. Each journey emphasized slow observation, careful recording, and thoughtful analysis, allowing the forest to reveal its secrets in measured increments. These practices exemplify a philosophy of exploration in which patience and attentiveness are as vital as courage and stamina. Quiet discoveries emerged in this period as well. Subtle alignment of earthworks, remnants of long-ago cultivation, and patterns of settlement suggested the existence of organized societies capable of sustaining significant populations in harmony with the environment. Fawcett interpreted these findings not as mere curiosities, but as evidence supporting the plausibility of Z. In these moments, belief and observation converged. Sustained attention allowed fragments of information to coalesce into a coherent vision, reinforcing the explorer's dedication and guiding his next steps. Public fascination mirrored Fawcett's own obsession. Maps bearing tentative locations for Z, lectures describing the forest's mysteries, and accounts of riverine communities captured imaginations across continents. Audiences were drawn to the calm, patient narrative of discovery. The idea that careful study, coupled with persistence and respect for the environment, might uncover one of history's enduring mysteries. Fawcett's vision, communicated thoughtfully and systematically, created a bridge between empirical study and collective wonder, allowing the forest to speak to those near and far. With every journey, the dream of Z became a shared fascination, drawing others into the forest's embrace. It was a vision sustained not by haste or speculation, but by careful attention, humility, and the quiet cultivation of understanding. Rivers, mounds, and forest clearings whispered fragments of a past civilization, while Fawcett's meticulous observations and reports gave structure to these whispers, transforming them into a path that others could follow in imagination, if not always in presence. In this way, Fawcett's vision extended beyond the Amazon itself. It became a meditation on human curiosity, patience, and the ethical pursuit of knowledge. The search for Z was as much about cultivating a careful, reflective approach to discovery as it was about finding a city. Through measured exploration, respectful engagement, and the careful dissemination of findings, Fawcett demonstrated that belief, when tempered by observation and empathy, could guide the mind and body through the most uncharted terrains. The forest, in turn, offered lessons not only in geography or archaeology, but in humility, persistence, and the quiet power of attentive curiosity. What hidden wisdom lies beneath the forest floor, waiting for those who move gently enough to see it? For centuries, the Amazon was imagined as a wild, untamed wilderness, its dense canopy concealing nothing but flora and fauna. Yet modern archaeological research has gradually revealed a landscape far more intricate and deliberate than earlier explorers could have imagined. Beneath layers of vegetation and soil, evidence of raised fields, earthworks, and complex settlements has emerged, suggesting a human presence that was both sophisticated and deeply attuned to environmental balance. The first hints came from subtle mounds, terraces, and patterns of soil enriched by centuries of cultivation, known today as terra preta. These signs indicate a mastery of environmental engineering, a long-term commitment to fertility and sustainability that allowed communities to thrive in a region once considered incapable of supporting dense populations. Through careful layering of charcoal, organic matter, and nutrients, pre-Columbian inhabitants created soils that remain fertile centuries later, a quiet testament to observation, experimentation, and patience. Urban-like settlements, now detectable through aerial surveys and satellite imaging, reveal that pre-Columbian societies were capable of organizing space at remarkable scales. Circular plazas, roadways, and interconnected clusters of dwellings suggest planning and coordination, hinting at governance structures and social cohesion previously thought impossible in such remote regions. These discoveries challenge long-held assumptions that the Amazon was sparsely populated or culturally simple, revealing instead a mosaic of communities that shaped and were shaped by their environment. Trade and communication likely reinforced this complexity. Evidence of material exchange, ceramic styles, and construction techniques across distant sites, demonstrates a network of interaction that connected settlements over hundreds of kilometers. The rivers, once highways for daily subsistence and trade, also linked these larger population centers, integrating environmental knowledge, cultural practices, and technological innovation across vast distances. In this light, the Amazon emerges not as an isolated wilderness, but as a living network of human ingenuity and adaptation. The scale of these transformations is subtle yet profound. Raised fields, mounds, and drainage systems were designed to manage floods, optimize agriculture, and sustain human habitation in a challenging environment. The planning required to create these features implies long-term vision, intergenerational collaboration, and detailed knowledge of seasonal cycles. In these constructions, one sees a quiet mastery of natural processes, where human activity enhanced rather than dominated the landscape. The forest itself became a partner, guiding practices and offering both resources and lessons. Archaeological findings also illuminate social and cultural sophistication. Large plazas and communal spaces suggest ritual or civic functions, while patterns in settlement layouts reveal attention to environmental conditions, social organization, and collective decision-making. Artifacts and construction methods demonstrate technical skill and aesthetic consideration, reflecting a civilization attuned to both functionality and symbolic expression. Even in its subtlety, the evidence conveys a deep understanding of how people can live sustainably, creatively, and cooperatively within a complex ecosystem. These discoveries reshape the narrative of the Amazon, linking myth with evidence. The legendary city of Z, long a symbol of imagination and exploration, gains plausibility when viewed against the backdrop of these engineered landscapes. While Fawcett could only speculate, modern research shows that the forest preserves layers of history, often invisible to the casual observer but waiting for careful study. The whispers of the past, encoded in soil, waterways, and spatial patterns, reveal civilizations that balanced ambition with ecological wisdom, challenging simplistic assumptions about human capability in dense tropical forests. Quiet revelations emerge in the interplay between myth and archaeology. The forest, once imagined as an obstacle to settlement, is now understood as a canvas upon which generations shaped their environment with precision and care. Each mound, terrace, and road reflects observation, patience, and coordination. These features are not only practical, they are expressions of ingenuity, imagination, and resilience. They remind us that human presence in the Amazon was deliberate, adaptive, and deeply respectful of the natural rhythms that govern survival. The Amazon, once thought inhospitable, showed signs of human ingenuity intertwined with nature itself. Rivers, soils, and vegetation were not merely resources to be exploited. They were partners in a subtle, sophisticated choreography of life. Communities learned to anticipate seasonal changes, manage water, enrich soils, and communicate over distance, creating a network of knowledge and practice that allowed them to flourish in harmony with the environment. This understanding reframes both legend and exploration, showing that the city of Z, whether fully realized or partly imagined, was part of a larger continuum of human creativity, resilience, and adaptation. In reflecting on these discoveries, one sees the forest not as empty or chaotic, but as a repository of memory, skill, and innovation. The whispers of the past rise through careful study, revealing societies capable of engineering, planning, and cultural expression on scales previously unimagined. For explorers, scholars, and quiet observers alike, the Amazon offers lessons in patience, respect, and the enduring interplay between human ingenuity and the natural world. Through gentle attention, the hidden complexity of the forest becomes visible, transforming legend into insight and myth into measured understanding. What does it mean to step into the unknown, knowing the forest may never let you return? In 1925, Percy Fawcett embarked on his last expedition into the Amazon, driven by a lifelong conviction that the lost city of Z lay hidden beneath the dense canopy. Preparation was meticulous. Supplies were gathered, routes planned, and trusted companions selected to accompany him on what would become one of the most enigmatic journeys in the history of exploration. Every detail was considered, from provisions and instruments to the subtle rhythms of river travel and seasonal change. Yet no amount of preparation could fully predict the challenges that awaited in a forest both vast and inscrutable. Fawcett was accompanied by his eldest son, Jack, and his loyal companion Raleigh Rimmel, forming a small, closely knit team whose trust and coordination were essential for the arduous journey ahead. The expedition moved deliberately, mindful of the environment and the knowledge of local guides who had shared insight into river currents, terrain, and potential hazards. Observations were recorded methodically. Maps were updated, notes taken on settlement traces, and sketches made of natural features. Even in the midst of uncertainty, Fawcett maintained a sense of purpose and calm, grounded in the careful application of skill and experience. The forest, ever present and unyielding, set the pace of their progress. Rivers, both guides and obstacles, dictated movement and decision-making. Seasonal floods transformed familiar channels into unpredictable mazes, while dense undergrowth slowed travel to a contemplative rhythm. Each day required observation, patience, and subtle adaptation. The expedition was a quiet negotiation with the environment, a balance between human ambition and the forest's intricate patterns. Fawcett's attention to detail, noting changes in vegetation, animal behavior, and river flow, reflected not only practicality, but a deep respect for the living landscape that shaped every choice. Communication with the outside world was intermittent, marked by letters sent from outposts along the route. These messages offered glimpses of progress and intention, but they also reflected the isolation and fragility of the endeavor. As the team ventured further into uncharted territory, the certainty of return faded, replaced by a tension that was subtle yet pervasive. Unlike dramatic accounts of peril and disaster, this tension was quiet, a sustained awareness that the forest could alter plans, erase trails, or withhold passage without warning. Each moment required presence of mind and the calm exercise of judgment. Fawcett's commitment to careful observation and respectful interaction remained central throughout the expedition. Encounters with indigenous communities were approached with patience and courtesy, recognizing the value of local knowledge while minimizing disruption. These moments of engagement were measured and reflective, revealing Fawcett's understanding that successful exploration depended as much on listening and learning as on movement or measurement. Through these exchanges, the forest revealed both guidance and subtle caution, shaping the expedition as much as the explorers shaped it. Despite meticulous planning, the journey carried inherent uncertainty. Supply lines were limited, health risks ever present, and navigation required constant attention. Fever, fatigue, and the complexity of the terrain were quiet, persistent challenges rather than dramatic catastrophes. Each day involved careful observation, incremental progress, and reflection on the forest's patterns. The expedition was an exercise in endurance, not heroics, a meditation on the limits of preparation, the subtle hazards of isolation, and the persistent allure of an unseen destination. Quiet discoveries punctuated the journey, as well. Traces of previous settlements, subtle earthworks, and riverine features offered confirmation that the forest had once nurtured complex societies. These glimpses encouraged hope and sustained determination, blending the practical work of navigation with the contemplative recognition of human history hidden in plain sight. For Fawcett and his companions, each observation was both evidence and inspiration, reinforcing the purpose of their journey without demanding immediate resolution or spectacle. As the expedition ventured into the forest's heart, the line between hope and peril blurred. The dense canopy obscured landmarks, and paths that once seemed navigable became intricate mazes of greenery. Yet within this uncertainty lay the rhythm of deliberate exploration. Slow, attentive, and thoughtful. Fawcett's leadership emphasized careful decision-making and mutual reliance, allowing the team to proceed with quiet confidence even as the unknown stretched endlessly ahead. In reflecting on Fawcett's final journey, one sees not a tale of reckless adventure, but a study in measured courage, patience, and reverence for the environment. The Amazon was neither conquered nor entirely understood. Rather, it demanded collaboration, observation, and a willingness to accept its mysteries. The expedition reminds us that exploration is as much an inward process of attention, reflection, and adaptability, as it is a movement through physical space. Each river crossed, each clearing discovered, and each subtle sign of past human activity carried lessons in persistence, humility, and the enduring pull of curiosity. How does one navigate a world where every tree and river carries generations of stories? For centuries, the Amazon has been home to communities whose knowledge of the forest is both intimate and profound. To outsiders like Fawcett and his contemporaries, the forest was a challenge to be measured, mapped, and conquered. But to the indigenous peoples who lived there, it was a living library, filled with subtle lessons, signs, and rhythms that demanded observation and respect. Their perspective offers a quiet but essential lens on exploration, reminding us that human experience is shaped as much by relationships as by geography. Indigenous communities often viewed explorers with a mix of curiosity, caution, and hospitality. Visitors brought unusual tools, clothing, and languages, creating opportunities for exchange but also requiring careful negotiation. Guides were sometimes offered, but always with awareness that knowledge of rivers, trails, and seasonal changes carried significant responsibility. To traverse the forest safely, outsiders needed trust, humility, and a willingness to learn, qualities that were tested daily amid the dense canopy, shifting waters, and hidden paths. Hospitality was measured and deliberate. Meals might be shared along riverbanks, advice given on navigation, or warnings offered about difficult terrain and seasonal hazards. These gestures reflected cultural values of care and communal responsibility, emphasizing that survival in the Amazon was a cooperative endeavor. The forest itself was intertwined with these social norms. Knowing its rhythms, respecting its dangers, and acting in accordance with the wisdom of elders were essential for both practical safety and ethical engagement. Cultural misunderstandings were inevitable. Explorers sometimes misread gestures, misinterpreted customs, or assumed uniformity among diverse communities. Yet these moments, when approached with reflection and humility, became opportunities for learning. Observers like Fawcett gradually came to appreciate the depth of local knowledge, understanding that what initially seemed enigmatic or restrictive was often a sophisticated adaptation to an environment of remarkable complexity. Through these interactions, the human and natural landscapes were inseparable. Rivers, forests, and communities each shaped the experience of the other. Indigenous guidance often extended beyond navigation. Communities imparted knowledge of medicinal plants, river currents, and ecological patterns that outsiders could not glean from maps alone. They taught the timing of flood cycles, the habits of wildlife, and the subtle cues that indicated the presence of other settlements or resources. Each lesson was a fragment of a larger system, woven from generations of observation and adaptation. For explorers, these teachings were invaluable, offering both practical safety and a deeper appreciation of the forest's intricate intelligence. Quiet discoveries emerged in these exchanges. Observers realized that survival in the Amazon required more than strength or ambition. It demanded attentiveness, patience, and respect. Each interaction revealed that knowledge was relational. Human skill was inseparable from the guidance of those who had lived in harmony with the forest for generations. The subtlety of these lessons contrasted with the often dramatic narratives of exploration, emphasizing reflection over action, listening over conquering, and curiosity guided by humility. The forest itself became a mediator. Paths chosen, campsites established, and journeys undertaken were all influenced by indigenous insight, blending human initiative with environmental wisdom. Each river bend, clearing, or high ground held layers of meaning, whether for safety, ritual, or sustenance. Outsiders gradually learned that the forest could be generous to those who respected its rhythms and careful to those who assumed dominion. In this way, Indigenous perspectives reshaped the very approach to exploration, emphasizing caution, collaboration, and ethical engagement over recklessness or haste. Through shared paths and whispered warnings, the human story intertwined with the timeless forest. Explorers and local communities coexisted in a delicate balance, where understanding, trust, and empathy became as essential as provisions or instruments. The forest was neither empty nor indifferent. It was a repository of history, culture, and knowledge, accessible to those who moved gently and attentively. In reflecting on these interactions, one sees that the legacy of exploration is inseparable from the wisdom and guidance of the people who have known the forest for generations, shaping both what was discovered and how it was perceived. Indigenous perspectives remind us that exploration is not solely an act of conquest, but a conversation with environment, culture, and history. Each journey is guided by listening, observation, and respect, revealing not only the mysteries of distant lands, but the depth of human collaboration and insight. In honoring these viewpoints, the story of the Amazon becomes richer and more balanced, a narrative that values reflection, patience, and the interwoven threads of human and natural worlds. What remains when the forest swallows a story, leaving only echoes behind? Percy Fawcett, along with his son Jack and companion Raleigh Rimmel, ventured into the heart of the Amazon in 1925, carrying the hope of discovery, meticulous preparation, and a vision that had guided him for decades. Yet, as the months passed, communication ceased, letters went unanswered, and the forest kept its secrets. The disappearance of Fawcett and his team marked the close of one of the most enigmatic chapters in exploration, leaving questions that would quietly persist across generations. Contemporary reactions were a mixture of concern, speculation, and reverent curiosity. Newspapers reported the loss, often emphasizing the perils of the forest, while scientific societies and fellow explorers considered the broader implications for understanding the Amazon. Public fascination was immediate. Here was a man of methodical observation, a careful and respectful explorer, seemingly consumed by the landscape he sought to understand. The absence of definitive answers heightened the allure, encouraging both reflection and imagination. Media coverage, though limited by the period's slower communication, contributed to a sense of both tragedy and mystery. Articles described the dangers of the jungle, the courage of explorers, and the tantalizing possibility that Z existed beyond human reach. Yet the tone of many accounts remained measured, emphasizing endurance, curiosity, and the unresolved nature of the quest rather than sensationalized fear. Readers were drawn to the quiet tension of uncertainty, to the notion that knowledge and legend might coexist in the same green expanse, waiting patiently for those willing to seek it. Scholars and adventurers debated the possible fate of Fawcett and his companions. Some considered natural hazards, disease, exhaustion, or accident, while others speculated about encounters with unfamiliar communities. Yet evidence was sparse, leaving space for interpretation, reflection, and continued inquiry. The absence itself became part of the narrative. The forest, in withholding closure, emphasized the limits of human understanding and the humility required to engage with landscapes shaped over millennia. The mystery deepened the cultural resonance of Z. Over the decades, the city transformed from a theoretical construct into a symbol of exploration, human aspiration, and the interplay between myth and reality. Writers, scholars, and enthusiasts revisited Fawcett's journals, analyzing his observations, routes, and reported discoveries. Maps were retraced, oral histories revisited, and subtle archaeological traces considered for what they might reveal about the civilization that inspired his search. In these quiet efforts, the legend endured not through spectacle, but through patient curiosity and reflective investigation. Even in disappearance, Fawcett's approach influenced the study of the Amazon. His careful attention to indigenous knowledge, ecological observation, and methodical recording offered a model for subsequent explorers and researchers. The forest was shown to be both a challenge and a teacher, requiring humility, observation, and ethical engagement. The narrative of loss was intertwined with lessons on respect for the environment and its inhabitants, emphasizing that human endeavor must move in dialogue with the living world rather than in opposition to it. Quiet fascination emerged from the story as well. For decades, the idea of a hidden city captured imaginations, inspiring explorers, writers, and scholars alike. The absence of concrete resolution allowed space for reflection. What does human ambition seek when confronted with mystery? How do stories of endurance, curiosity, and respect for unknown landscapes shape our understanding of history? Fawcett's disappearance, rather than closing the narrative, opened it to contemplation and measured wonder. Even in absence, the legend of Z grew, nourished by imagination, memory, and unanswered questions. Rivers and forests, mounds and soil, all became part of an enduring dialogue between human curiosity and the natural world. Fawcett's journey, though unfinished, remains a testament to the interplay between preparation and uncertainty, observation and speculation, ambition and humility. The forest, ever patient, continues to hold its secrets, inviting those who follow to move gently, observe attentively, and reflect quietly. In reflecting on this chapter of history, one sees that mystery need not be unsettling to be profound. The disappearance of Fawcett and his companions reminds us that the unknown can inspire reflection, admiration, and measured wonder. Legends endure not merely through stories told loudly, but through the quiet, persistent curiosity of those willing to seek, learn, and imagine within the rhythms of time and place. The forest, in holding its secrets, encourages us to do the same, to listen, observe, and honor the intricate patterns of both human endeavor and the natural world. Could patience and science finally unveil what myth has long suggested? In the decades following Percy Fawcett's disappearance, the Amazon continued to inspire explorers, archaeologists, and researchers, each bringing a measured, methodical approach to the pursuit of hidden history. Unlike the hurried adventures of earlier centuries, modern expeditions emphasized careful observation, ethical engagement with indigenous communities, and the application of new technologies to uncover subtle traces of past civilizations. The forest, still dense and enigmatic, demanded patience and respect, rewarding those who approached with both curiosity and humility. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw a convergence of traditional fieldwork and innovative methods. Archaeologists returned to rivers and clearings noted by Fawcett, systematically mapping sites, cataloging artifacts, and studying soil composition. Remote sensing technologies, including satellite imaging and LiDAR, revealed previously invisible earthworks, raised fields, and settlement patterns beneath the forest canopy. These discoveries confirmed that human habitation in the Amazon had been both extensive and highly organized, challenging long-held assumptions of sparsely populated, simple societies. Expeditions were often slow and deliberate, emphasizing dialogue with local communities and recognition of their knowledge. Guides who had inherited generations of environmental understanding provided insight into terrain, waterways, and seasonal patterns. Researchers learned to move with the rhythms of the forest, noting signs that might otherwise go unnoticed. Subtle changes in soil color, hidden terraces, or alignments suggesting communal planning. Each observation, recorded carefully, contributed to a larger picture of human adaptation and ingenuity, connecting myth, history, and empirical evidence in a continuous narrative. One of the most transformative tools has been LiDAR, light detection and ranging, which uses laser scanning from aircraft to penetrate dense canopy and reveal structures and landscapes hidden from ground view. Through LiDAR, researchers identified complex networks of roads, plazas, and habitation areas spanning vast distances, confirming that pre-Columbian societies engineered the land with remarkable skill. These urban-like settlements demonstrated knowledge of water management, agriculture, and spatial organization, illustrating that human innovation had long flourished in harmony with the Amazon's challenging environment. Quiet discoveries punctuated these modern journeys. Archaeologists uncovered terraces used to control flooding, channels to direct water flow, and evidence of terra preta soils, demonstrating sustainable agricultural practices. These findings echo the observations that inspired Fawcett and others, yet now they are documented with precision, offering concrete evidence of long-standing human ingenuity. Every mound, field, and channel tells a story of adaptation, planning, and collaboration, revealing civilizations that left enduring marks beneath the forest's green canopy. The integration of modern technology with careful fieldwork has also allowed researchers to reinterpret earlier accounts. Journals, maps, and anecdotal observations from 19th and early 20th century explorers, once considered anecdotal or fanciful, can now be cross-referenced with satellite data and archaeological surveys. Sites that Fawcett had speculated about are slowly being contextualized within a broader understanding of the region's history, offering a dialogue between historical imagination and empirical discovery. The forest, once viewed as a barrier, now becomes a partner in revealing its own past. Methodical exploration has emphasized minimal disruption to both environment and communities. Researchers work to ensure that archaeological investigation respects the forest's ecological balance, while actively collaborating with indigenous groups to preserve cultural heritage. This careful approach underscores a shift in perspective. The Amazon is not merely a space to conquer or document, but a living, inhabited landscape that holds lessons for both history and contemporary practice. With technology as guide, explorers returned to the forest with quiet determination. Their progress is measured, patient, and reflective, prioritizing understanding over haste. Each expedition uncovers fragments of history, sometimes subtle, sometimes transformative, adding layers of evidence that illuminate human presence, ingenuity, and adaptation. The myth of Z, once a symbol of uncertainty and speculation, becomes entwined with tangible signs of civilization, revealing a story that is both intricate and enduring. The interplay between myth, early exploration, and modern research illustrates the cumulative nature of discovery. Fawcett's vision, though never fully realized in his lifetime, has guided successive generations of observers who move slowly, attentively, and respectfully through the forest. Each expedition, whether mapping a terrace, documenting a river route, or interpreting satellite images, contributes to a more nuanced understanding of human history in the Amazon. The forest's secrets are slowly being revealed, not through spectacle, but through patience, observation, and measured inquiry. In reflecting on modern expeditions, one recognizes that the pursuit of knowledge in the Amazon is as much an ethical endeavor as an intellectual one. The landscape, rich in history and complexity, invites a quiet dialogue between human curiosity and natural wisdom. The forest rewards those who approach gently, observes attentively, and integrates evidence with imagination. Through these patient efforts, the lost city of Z transforms from myth into a window onto the ingenuity, resilience, and creativity of pre-Columbian societies, revealing a world that continues to inspire reflection, wonder, and respect. When the soil speaks, what stories does it tell of civilizations long hidden? Beneath the dense canopy of the Amazon, layers of earth preserve subtle but profound evidence of human ingenuity. Geoglyphs etched into the land, the rich, dark soils known as terra preta, and traces of large pre-Columbian settlements all reveal that the forest was far from empty. Instead, it was a living, engineered environment, shaped by communities who understood the rhythms of rivers, the cycles of the soil, and the needs of the people who depended on them. Geoglyphs, enormous geometric designs visible only from above, attest to the ceremonial, social, and organizational sophistication of these societies. Straight lines, circles, and interlocking patterns were created through coordinated labor, demonstrating not only technical skill, but also the presence of structured communities capable of planning on a remarkable scale. These shapes, carefully aligned with local topography, suggest cultural and ritual significance, while simultaneously hinting at a network of settlements connected by shared purpose and collective memory. Terra preta offers another layer of quiet revelation. This nutrient-rich soil, enriched through generations of organic matter, charcoal, and composting, allowed for sustainable agriculture in an environment previously thought unsuitable for dense populations. By creating and maintaining these fertile plots, pre-Columbian communities demonstrated both environmental mastery and long-term foresight. The forests, once imagined as obstacles, were partners in cultivation, providing resources while being carefully managed to sustain human life over centuries. Evidence of large settlements further underscores the sophistication of Amazonian societies. Clusters of dwellings, raised fields, and ceremonial spaces reveal a capacity for urban planning, social coordination, and environmental adaptation. These settlements were not haphazard. They reflect a deliberate understanding of water management, soil fertility, and community needs. Roads, canals, and connecting pathways suggest interaction across distances, hinting at a broader cultural and economic network previously unrecognized. Each feature, while subtle on the ground, contributes to a mosaic of human ingenuity interwoven with the forest landscape. Archaeologists have also observed patterns that suggest cultural and spiritual cohesion. Central plazas, elevated structures, and aligned mounds indicate spaces for communal gatherings, ritual observances, or governance, while the spatial arrangement of dwellings reflects attention to both practicality and symbolic meaning. Through careful excavation and analysis, researchers can piece together not only how people lived, but how they understood their place in the natural and social world. These insights reveal a civilization attuned to its environment, balancing human needs with ecological harmony. Each new finding challenges earlier assumptions about the Amazon's capacity to sustain complex societies. Where explorers once perceived an inhospitable wilderness, evidence now shows deliberate modification of land, sophisticated agricultural practices, and thoughtful urban design. These discoveries connect the legend of Z to tangible human achievement, bridging imagination and reality in a way that emphasizes patience, observation, and respect for both history and environment. The process of uncovering these traces has itself been contemplative. Researchers move slowly, guided by maps, aerial imagery, and local knowledge, observing subtle changes in vegetation, soil, and terrain. Every mound, ditch, or linear alignment is carefully recorded, contributing to an understanding that is cumulative and reflective rather than rushed. In this way, the forest itself becomes a partner in discovery, revealing its secrets gradually to those who approach with care and attentiveness. Each revelation illuminated not only the past, but the fragile persistence of human ingenuity. Geoglyphs, fertile soils, and remnants of settlements tell of societies capable of creating enduring structures within a delicate ecosystem. They remind us that human endeavor is often subtle, measured, and intertwined with the rhythms of nature. These quiet triumphs of planning, cultivation, and community resonate across centuries, connecting us to people whose presence was once nearly erased by time and forest growth. In reflecting on the evidence, one appreciates the interplay between myth and archaeology. Fawcett's vision of Z, long considered legend, gains plausibility when seen against the backdrop of carefully engineered landscapes and sustainable practices. The forest, far from concealing all, preserves the cumulative wisdom of generations, waiting to be interpreted by attentive observers. These findings invite a deeper contemplation of human resilience, creativity, and the capacity to shape environments thoughtfully, even in challenging conditions. The story that emerges is one of quiet sophistication. It is a narrative of communities who observed, experimented, and adapted, who built, cultivated, and organized, and who lived in intricate harmony with the forest. Each discovery, whether visible from a clearing or detected through satellite imaging, adds a layer of understanding, transforming myth into a dialogue with the past. The forest whispers its lessons to those who move with patience, humility, and curiosity, revealing civilizations whose ingenuity endures beneath the canopy. Can the forest hold both truth and story, each enriching the other? The legend of Z, passed down through Percy Fawcett's writings, indigenous oral traditions, and centuries of European imagination, occupies a unique space between myth and history. Modern archaeology and careful fieldwork have begun to reveal that beneath the Amazon's dense canopy lie traces of settlements, agricultural engineering, and social organization. Tangible evidence that validates aspects of these long-held stories. Yet the city Fawcett envisioned remains elusive, existing as much in imagination as in documented reality, a reminder that human aspiration often intertwines with the landscapes we seek to understand. Fawcett's journals, once viewed skeptically, now serve as a bridge connecting exploration with emerging evidence. His meticulous observations of rivers, earthworks, and local settlements often correspond with patterns detected by satellite imagery and archaeological surveys. Paths traced, terraces noted, and anecdotal accounts align with features that modern methods have revealed, demonstrating that the explorer's imagination was guided by careful observation. The interplay of intuition and evidence underscores a fundamental truth. Myth often emerges from fragments of reality, interpreted and amplified by curiosity, memory, and hope. Local knowledge continues to illuminate these discoveries. Indigenous communities have preserved understanding of river courses, forest ecology, and ancestral settlement patterns that outsiders alone could not reconstruct. Oral histories, when listened to attentively, provide context for earthworks, ceremonial sites, and other features that might otherwise be overlooked or misinterpreted. The forest itself, observed through generations of human engagement, becomes a repository of memory and wisdom, reminding us that historical reality is often inseparable from cultural perception. Archaeological findings offer measured confirmation without collapsing the wonder of legend. Geoglyphs, raised fields, and remnants of settlements suggest a civilization capable of complex social, agricultural, and ceremonial organization. Yet the lost city of Z, as Fawcett imagined it, is less a single architectural marvel than a network of human ingenuity integrated with its environment. The forest conceals and preserves these features, emphasizing subtlety over spectacle. In this light, the legend does not contradict the evidence. It reframes it, inviting reflection on scale, context, and the imagination required to pursue discovery. The dialogue between myth and fact enriches both. Fawcett's vision inspired generations of explorers and researchers, motivating careful investigation while respecting the forest's complexity. Archaeology, in turn, grounds legend in measurable reality, showing that human societies once flourished where dense green once suggested emptiness. Each layer, imagined city, oral memory, and physical trace, complements the others, revealing a multidimensional narrative in which curiosity, creativity, and scholarship converge. Contemplation of this convergence encourages reflection on the nature of exploration itself. Z exists simultaneously as a dream and as a subject of study, reminding us that human understanding often progresses through both speculation and observation. Legends guide inquiry, shaping questions and inspiring careful methods, while evidence informs interpretation, tempering imagination with context. The forest, patient and enduring, holds space for both approaches, revealing that the pursuit of knowledge is as much an inward journey of reflection as it is an outward journey through rivers and canopies. The synthesis of legend and fact also invites a reassessment of Fawcett's legacy. His passion was neither purely fanciful nor solely empirical. It was an integration of observation, intuition, and reverence for both people and place. In this, he exemplifies the quiet courage required to engage with unknown landscapes, balancing curiosity with respect. Modern research validates much of his careful documentation, while the enduring mystery preserves the poetic and imaginative qualities that first captured the public's attention. With the forest slowly yielding its secrets, the legend of Z became a bridge between past and present. Archaeological traces speak to human ingenuity and resilience, while the myth preserves wonder, guiding reflection and curiosity. In embracing both, one sees that exploration is not only the uncovering of material evidence, but also the recognition of imagination as an essential companion to discovery. The city of Z, whether fully realized or partially imagined, continues to inspire attentive observation, careful scholarship, and contemplative awe. Ultimately, the Amazon teaches that truth and story need not oppose each other. Each enriches the other, providing context, depth, and resonance. The forest preserves both human history and human aspiration, whispering reminders that our understanding of the past is enriched when we honor both evidence and imagination, patience and wonder, observation and reflection. Z endures as a symbol of this balance, a city both found and unfound, a story both told and waiting to be discovered. What power does a place hold when it lives most vividly in imagination? The story of the lost city of Z has long transcended maps and expeditions, taking residence in literature, film, and the collective consciousness. From early 20th century accounts to modern novels and documentaries, the tale continues to inspire curiosity, reflection, and wonder. It is a story that moves gently through the imagination, inviting readers and viewers to walk silently beside explorers, to feel the weight of humidity, the murmur of rivers, and the quiet majesty of an untouched forest. The influence of Z in literature is profound. Fawcett's own writings, rich with observation and personal reflection, became touchstones for subsequent authors. Adventure stories, novels, and biographies have drawn from his journals, emphasizing both the mystery of the Amazon and the enduring tension between hope and uncertainty. Yet these narratives rarely rely on sensationalism. Instead, they cultivate a contemplative atmosphere, mirroring the patience required to navigate rivers, read the land, and understand communities deeply intertwined with the forest. Through these stories, the legend of Z continues to spark imagination while honoring the rhythm of life it seeks to portray. Cinema, too, has embraced the allure of the lost city. Documentaries, historical recreations, and feature films often depict the forest as a character in its own right, dense, alive, and full of secrets. Filmmakers focus on the human experience of exploration, the careful preparation, the moments of quiet discovery, and the gentle interactions with local peoples. Audiences are invited not only to witness adventure, but to enter a reflective space where curiosity, patience, and respect for nature guide the narrative. In this way, the story of Z becomes more than spectacle. It is an invitation to contemplate humanity's relationship with the unknown. Popular imagination thrives on the tension between myth and evidence. The city of Z has become a symbol of aspiration and mystery, illustrating the human desire to seek knowledge while acknowledging the limits of understanding. Readers, viewers, and students are drawn to the narrative not simply for what may lie hidden, but for the reflective journey it inspires. The patience to observe, the humility to learn, and the capacity to balance wonder with factual inquiry. Z exists both in the mind and in the forest, encouraging an appreciation of process, not only outcome. Quiet inspiration emerges from the story's longevity. The legend has motivated researchers to return to the Amazon with careful methodology, while also encouraging educators and storytellers to explore the forest's ecological and cultural richness. By intertwining fact with legend, these narratives sustain curiosity while promoting respect for indigenous knowledge, environmental stewardship, and historical reflection. The enduring resonance of Z demonstrates that stories, when handled thoughtfully, can cultivate deep engagement without urgency, excitement, or spectacle, a calm and immersive form of learning and imagination. The symbolic power of Z is reinforced by its meditative qualities. Unlike tales of sudden conquest or dramatic triumph, this story unfolds slowly, inviting listeners to ponder rivers, trails, and forest rhythms. It emphasizes human endurance, ethical engagement, and the thoughtful pursuit of knowledge. Audiences are encouraged to dwell on the textures of life in the Amazon. The interplay of sunlight through canopy, the patterns of rainfall and river flow, and the subtle indicators of past civilizations waiting quietly beneath the soil. This approach fosters not only understanding, but a serene empathy for both explorers and the people whose lands they traversed. Even as paper and celluloid tell the tale, the forest itself remains the truest keeper of secrets. Earthworks, geoglyphs, and traces of ancient settlements endure beneath the canopy, often invisible to those who pass hurriedly, yet patiently observable to those willing to slow down. The jungle preserves not only the physical remnants of civilizations, but the lessons embedded in ecological harmony, sustainable agriculture, and social coordination. In this sense, cultural resonance extends beyond imagination into lived reality, reminding us that stories flourish most richly when they remain rooted in both human experience and natural context. Z's cultural influence also shapes contemporary perspectives on exploration and conservation. By reflecting on the Amazon's hidden histories, audiences gain a renewed awareness of the delicate balance between curiosity, discovery, and responsibility. The legend encourages a reflective approach to engagement, one that values careful observation, ethical conduct, and reverent patience over hasty conquest. This perspective resonates with viewers seeking peaceful engagement with history, geography, and human endeavor, allowing imagination to coexist with critical understanding. Through literature, film, and ongoing research, the story of Z becomes a bridge connecting past and present, fact and myth, nature and human aspiration. It exemplifies how a place, largely unseen yet deeply known through memory and narrative, can captivate, instruct, and inspire. The Amazon, with its rivers, forests, and soil, is both subject and teacher, holding the echoes of civilizations and the quiet guidance of the natural world. In the reflection of Z, audiences encounter not only a legend, but a meditation on perseverance, curiosity, and the intertwined rhythms of life and history. In this enduring resonance, the lost city of Z continues to inspire, a symbol of exploration that is gentle, contemplative, and intellectually enriching. It reminds us that the forest, like a patient narrator, offers its lessons slowly, rewards observation, and invites quiet reflection. Even as stories are told and retold, the Amazon remains the ultimate arbiter of memory, preserving history in its own time and space, and offering audiences the opportunity to listen, wonder, and imagine with care. What does a lost city teach us about living in harmony with nature? Beyond the allure of legend, the exploration of Z and its surrounding regions has offered profound lessons in anthropology, ecology, and archaeology. Each expedition, whether driven by curiosity or scholarly rigor, has revealed evidence of human ingenuity, ecological stewardship, and social organization, demonstrating that civilizations can flourish sustainably within even the most challenging environments. The contributions to anthropology are particularly notable. Researchers studying the Amazon's hidden settlements have gained insight into pre-Columbian social structures, settlement patterns, and community interactions. Long-standing oral traditions preserved by indigenous communities provide context for these archaeological findings, illustrating how culture, memory, and environment coexisted. By examining dwellings, communal spaces, and artifacts, anthropologists have reconstructed the rhythms of daily life, the subtle coordination of labor, the ceremonial gatherings, and the practical wisdom embedded in long-term land management. Each discovery reminds us that human societies are capable of complex organization, even in seemingly remote landscapes. Ecology, too, has benefited from this careful study. The practice of creating terra preta, or enriched soils, highlights an approach to agriculture that is both productive and regenerative. Communities engineered fertile plots that could sustain repeated cultivation without degrading the forest. Raised fields, canals, and water management systems reveal an understanding of hydrology, flood cycles, and crop rotation, illustrating that pre-Columbian inhabitants shaped their environment thoughtfully, ensuring balance rather than exploitation. These practices inform modern ecological research, offering models for sustainable agriculture that harmonize with local biodiversity rather than diminish it. Archaeological work has illuminated not only the material culture of these societies, but also the networks connecting distant communities. Roads, plazas, and ceremonial centers suggest that settlements were part of an integrated system, with trade, knowledge, and ritual extending across regions. This challenges earlier assumptions that the Amazon was sparsely populated and technologically limited. Instead, Evidence shows a sophisticated understanding of spatial planning, social cohesion, and environmental adaptation. In observing these landscapes, scientists recognize that innovation often arises from the interplay of necessity, collaboration, and respect for natural cycles. The broader lesson lies in adaptation and resilience. The civilizations that inspired Fawcett's dream of Z thrived in an environment that required careful attention to seasonal changes, soil fertility, and resource availability. By reading the forest, learning its rhythms, and developing systems that harmonized with natural patterns, these communities demonstrate principles that are relevant today: thoughtful engagement, long-term planning, and integration with ecological systems rather than domination. Modern researchers interpret these patterns with both scientific rigor and reflective admiration, acknowledging that knowledge can emerge quietly, beneath the canopy, through patience and observation. The scientific legacy of Z-related exploration also includes methodological lessons. Expeditions that prioritize collaboration with local communities, careful documentation, and minimally invasive investigation set a standard for contemporary fieldwork. Researchers have learned to move slowly, observe attentively, and synthesize diverse forms of knowledge: oral history, environmental cues, archaeological data, into a coherent understanding of the past. This approach fosters respect for both human and natural landscapes, demonstrating that scholarship and curiosity can coexist with ethical stewardship. Each new discovery, from earthworks to geoglyphs to signs of sustainable cultivation, reinforces the idea that human presence need not compromise ecological integrity. In fact, long-term habitation in the Amazon required a sophisticated understanding of biodiversity, crop rotation, and soil management. Such knowledge, preserved over centuries, highlights a deep and respectful relationship with nature, offering insights for modern sustainability and conservation efforts. In this way, the exploration of Z's legacy transcends historical curiosity, bridging into contemporary science and environmental awareness. From story to science, the forest continues to offer wisdom to those willing to observe quietly. The legend of Z, once primarily a narrative of imagination and ambition, now informs real-world understanding of human resilience, environmental stewardship, and cultural complexity. It reminds us that myths can inspire exploration, while evidence refines understanding, and that the interplay of imagination and science creates a richer, more reflective comprehension of history. Ultimately, the scientific legacy of Z is both practical and philosophical. It teaches that careful observation, patience, and respect for place can yield enduring knowledge, that civilizations can thrive in balance with nature, and that curiosity guided by ethical reflection can illuminate the intricate connections between humans and the world they inhabit. In the quiet forest, beneath canopy and soil, this lesson endures, a testament to human ingenuity, ecological harmony, and the patient unfolding of discovery. Can a place exist fully, even if no one walks its streets? The lost city of Z occupies a unique space in the human imagination, one that is neither entirely myth nor wholly documented reality. It exists between worlds, as a legend passed through generations, as a quest recorded in the meticulous notes of explorers like Percy Fawcett, and as a slowly emerging historical reality revealed through careful research and archaeological evidence. This liminal existence gives Z a quiet power, inviting reflection on memory, curiosity, and the enduring allure of places yet to be fully understood. Z survives not only in maps and field reports, but in the collective human consciousness. Stories of its rivers, plazas, and hidden structures have traveled across continents and centuries, inspiring curiosity that is as much philosophical as it is geographical. The city embodies our longing to understand the unknown, to follow paths that challenge perception, and to reconcile imagination with observation. It is a reminder that exploration is not merely a physical endeavor, but an intellectual and emotional journey, one that unfolds as gently as the flow of a river through the forest. In considering Z, we also reflect on the nature of memory. Oral traditions of indigenous communities, coupled with the journals of explorers, create a tapestry where past and present converge. Memory preserves not just events, but meaning, the wisdom of how humans once lived in harmony with their environment, the ethics of engagement with the unknown, and the reverence for landscapes that sustain life. These layers of memory inform modern understanding, showing that history is never solely the sum of physical artifacts. It is also the echo of thought, experience, and imagination across time. Curiosity plays an essential role in this delicate balance between myth and reality. Fawcett's pursuit of Z exemplified the quiet determination to seek knowledge, guided as much by intuition as by empirical observation. His journeys, fraught with uncertainty, underscore the human desire to venture into the unknown, to listen to the subtle signals of the environment, and to find meaning in both discovery and absence. Modern scholars continue this tradition, moving thoughtfully through the forest, combining technology with patience, and allowing the landscape to reveal its secrets on its own terms. The philosophical resonance of Z lies in its liminality. It reminds us that human understanding is often incomplete, shaped by what is seen, remembered, and imagined. The city exists simultaneously as inspiration and evidence, a place that challenges the mind to embrace ambiguity while cultivating wonder. This duality encourages reflection on broader truths, that the world contains mysteries beyond immediate comprehension, that human creativity is inseparable from the landscapes we inhabit, and that the act of searching itself carries intrinsic value. Even the forest participates in this dialogue between worlds. Beneath the canopy, traces of settlements, cultivated fields, and ceremonial spaces persist quietly, revealing ingenuity and resilience. These remnants do not demand attention. They reward it. By approaching with patience, respect, and contemplative awareness, researchers and explorers alike witness a living record of human ambition intertwined with nature. In this sense, Z is not lost but subtly present, a city whose streets are walked through imagination, observation, and reflection rather than footsteps alone. The city of Z also serves as a mirror for human aspiration. It represents our drive to understand, to seek meaning, and to connect with the unknown. Yet it does so without haste or spectacle, inviting calm contemplation. It encourages audiences to consider their relationship with discovery, to value patience over urgency, thoughtfulness over conquest, and wonder over certainty. In this reflective space, Z becomes more than a historical quest. It becomes a meditation on the enduring dialogue between human curiosity and the natural world. And as the forest whispers, the city of Z endures, not just in maps, but in the hearts of those who listen. Its presence reminds us that the most profound discoveries are sometimes those that exist in the interplay of myth, memory, and careful observation. Z exemplifies the quiet power of exploration conducted with respect, curiosity, and reflective patience, offering lessons that resonate far beyond the dense Amazonian canopy. In this contemplative resonance, Z is both real and imagined, temporal and eternal. It invites audiences to dwell gently on the nature of history, the persistence of culture, and the subtle truths that emerge when humans engage attentively with the unknown. Through this lens, the lost city becomes a living story, a bridge between worlds, a symbol of enduring wonder, and a testament to the quiet, patient pursuit of knowledge that honors both the past and the present. What does a lost city reveal about ourselves and the lands we call home? The story of Z, unfolding over centuries through legend, exploration, and discovery, offers more than a chronicle of ambition and mystery. It is a meditation on the human capacity to wonder, to observe patiently, and to engage thoughtfully with environments far larger than ourselves. The Amazon, vast and alive, teaches humility, a recognition that human presence is but a thread within a rich tapestry woven by rivers, trees, and countless generations of life. In contemplating the forest, one becomes attuned to its rhythms. The meandering rivers, shifting with seasons and tides, reflect a patience that humans often struggle to emulate. The canopy, dense yet porous, allows light and shadow to intermingle, creating patterns both subtle and profound. Within these patterns, explorers and scientists alike have discovered lessons in observation, adaptation, and respect. Z, imagined or real, is inseparable from this context. The city, whether fully material or partially imagined, emerges as an emblem of harmony between human endeavor and natural persistence. Human ambition, as expressed in the quest for Z, is both illuminating and instructive. Figures like Percy Fawcett exemplify courage tempered by curiosity, a willingness to journey into the unknown while attending to the wisdom of local guides, environmental cues, and the forest itself. Their stories reveal the delicate balance between aspiration and humility, reminding us that the pursuit of knowledge need not rush or conquer. The forest offers guidance through silence, requiring patience and attentiveness, and in doing so, teaches that true discovery often proceeds at the pace of observation rather than urgency. The interplay of myth and reality enhances this lesson. Z exists in a liminal space where imagination and evidence coalesce. Legends preserved through indigenous oral traditions and European writings are complemented by the physical traces uncovered by archaeology, geoglyph mapping, and environmental study. Together, they demonstrate that understanding is not solely the province of the empirical or the fantastical. Rather, it emerges where curiosity, narrative, and observation meet. The forest, holding both memory and potential, offers a living classroom for these reflections. Respect for nature is another profound insight. The Amazon is not merely a backdrop to human history, but an active participant in it. It preserves evidence of civilizations, nurtures biodiversity, and challenges every traveler to approach with care. Sustainable practices of pre-Columbian communities, from terra preta cultivation to water management and settlement planning, exemplify an ethic of engagement that balances human needs with environmental stewardship. In contemplating Z and the forest, one recognizes that history is inseparable from ecology. The story of human ingenuity is most compelling when it exists in dialogue with the natural world. Curiosity, practiced with reflection, emerges as a guiding principle. Explorers and modern researchers alike have learned to move gently, to listen to subtle signals in the landscape, and to interpret evidence with patience and humility. Every geoglyph, raised field, and settlement remnant conveys the quiet sophistication of human adaptation. Each discovery is both a reward and an invitation to observe more closely, to reflect more deeply, and to appreciate the layers of knowledge preserved by time and environment. Through this lens, the pursuit of Z becomes a meditation, not a conquest, a slow unfolding of understanding guided by attentiveness rather than urgency. The story of Z also illuminates human imagination and its enduring role in shaping exploration. Legends inspire inquiry, while evidence tempers and deepens interpretation. The Amazon's vastness allows both to coexist. Imagination motivates travel and observation, while careful study refines and enriches the story. In this interplay, one perceives a quiet balance, a model for how humans might approach the unknown in both history and life, with curiosity, patience, and a willingness to accept that some mysteries may remain partly unresolved, yet still profoundly instructive. In reflecting on Z and the forest, humility emerges as a recurring theme. The Amazon dwarfs human expectation, and its preservation of hidden settlements and ecological systems reminds us of our small place within a complex web of life. Yet within this humility lies inspiration, the capacity to learn, to observe, and to marvel at human creativity sustained in tandem with the rhythms of the natural world. Every river bend, every shadowed canopy, and every trace of civilization carries this lesson, that endurance and ingenuity thrive most when exercised in harmony with context, rather than in opposition to it. In every river bend and canopy shadow, the forest reminds us of the beauty of the unknown. The lost city of Z, whether as legend, historical reality, or both, is emblematic of the quiet lessons the Amazon imparts. It teaches that exploration is not merely a physical act, but a reflective, patient, and ethical engagement with history, culture, and environment. It demonstrates that myth and evidence are complementary forces, guiding human understanding in ways that reward attentive observation, contemplation, and reverence for life in all its forms. The forest whispers that knowledge is layered, that discovery is iterative, and that the most meaningful truths are often revealed slowly, through observation, care, and reflection. Z endures as a symbol of this ethos. A city not only hidden in the forest, but present in the imagination, study, and reflective thought of those who engage with it gently. In learning from Z and the Amazon, one comes to understand not just a lost city, but the enduring principles of curiosity, respect, and harmony that guide human endeavor, and the quiet grandeur of the lands we are privileged to explore. Can the unknown itself be a source of quiet wonder? The city of Z continues to captivate the human imagination not simply because of lost riches or forgotten streets, but because of the gentle tension between what is known and what remains unseen. Mystery, in this sense, is not a source of fear or urgency, but a contemplative space where curiosity and patience are rewarded. It invites reflection, imagination, and a careful engagement with the vastness of the Amazon and the intricacies of human history. Explorers, scholars, and dreamers alike have been drawn to Z because the forest holds both possibility and restraint. Every river bend, shadowed glade, and pattern of earthwork suggests stories waiting to be understood, yet resists hasty interpretation. This balance encourages a mindful approach, to observe carefully, to question gently, and to remain open to discovery without demanding immediate answers. In doing so, the pursuit of Z becomes less about conquest and more about reflection, offering a serene engagement with history and nature alike. The enduring fascination with Z is also a testament to the human love of story. Legends and reports, whether recorded by indigenous oral traditions or the meticulous journals of explorers, create a rich tapestry that blends imagination with evidence. Each narrative layer, Fawcett's meticulous notes, the reports of 19th-century explorers, and modern archaeological studies, adds depth, yet none resolves the mystery completely. This incompleteness is not a limitation, but a space for contemplation. It encourages audiences to consider the unknown as something to cherish, rather than something to fear, emphasizing wonder over certainty. Mystery allows the forest to speak on its own terms. The Amazon, dense and expansive, preserves traces of civilizations, complex ecological systems, and cultural memories that unfold gradually to those who move with patience. Through observation and careful inquiry, scholars have uncovered geoglyphs, terra preta, and evidence of intricate pre-Columbian settlement patterns. Each finding illuminates human ingenuity and adaptability, yet always leaves room for further reflection. In this interplay between revelation and enigma, Z remains a bridge between history and imagination, offering lessons in humility, patience, and attentive observation. This contemplative engagement also highlights the positive role of uncertainty in exploration. Unlike narratives that dramatize danger or obsession, the story of Z demonstrates how the unknown can inspire creativity, empathy, and intellectual rigor. It reminds us that not every question must be answered immediately, and that some of the most enduring insights emerge from thoughtful observation and reflection. The forest itself encourages this approach. Slow, attentive, and respectful, yielding its lessons over time rather than demanding instant comprehension. Z's enduring mystery also emphasizes the importance of perspective. For explorers like Fawcett, the forest was simultaneously a laboratory, a classroom, and a canvas for imagination. For modern scientists, it is a repository of knowledge, preserving evidence of ecological sophistication and human adaptation. For the wider public, it is a source of inspiration, inviting quiet contemplation of ambition, resilience, and harmony with nature. In each of these perspectives, the unknown functions not as a void, but as a space for curiosity, reflection, and serene wonder, a place where imagination and observation coexist. Even as maps are refined and archaeological discoveries continue, the forest keeps its final secrets in gentle silence. No single expedition has claimed the totality of Z. No image or report can fully capture the subtleties of its rivers, canopy, and earthworks. This restraint, inherent in the natural environment itself, teaches a powerful lesson: that the most profound truths often reside not in certainty, but in the patient pursuit of understanding, and in the ability to appreciate the mystery as it slowly unfolds. The quiet power of Z's mystery extends beyond exploration. It encourages mindfulness in how we approach the world, to move deliberately, to listen attentively, and to engage ethically with the landscapes and communities we encounter. It celebrates curiosity tempered with reflection and imagination guided by observation. In this light, Z becomes more than a lost city. It is a lens through which human inquiry, ethical engagement, and the wonder of nature converge. Ultimately, the enduring allure of Z is a meditation on the unknown itself. It reminds us that some mysteries are most meaningful when approached with serenity and patience, and that wonder is amplified, rather than diminished, by restraint. The forest preserves this balance, allowing explorers, scholars, and dreamers alike to inhabit a space where curiosity and contemplation coexist. In this gentle tension, Z continues to captivate, inspire, and teach, a testament to the quiet, persistent power of the unknown. When we close our eyes, can we walk among the lost cities and hear the whispers of the past? The Amazon invites such quiet journeys, where imagination, memory, and history converge beneath its vast canopy. It is a place where rivers murmur their timeless rhythms, where sunlight dances through leaves in shifting patterns, and where the traces of civilizations, real or imagined, linger in the soil and air. In contemplating the story of Z, we are invited to move gently through these layers of time and space, carrying both wonder and reflection with us. The forest itself becomes a teacher, offering lessons in observation, patience, and humility. Every bend of a river, every clearing in the canopy, and every subtle sign of human presence encourages attentive awareness. Explorers like Percy Fawcett walked these paths with careful regard for both the land and the people who inhabited it, and modern researchers continue this tradition, approaching the forest with respect and curiosity. In this way, the pursuit of Z is not merely a quest for ruins or maps, but a meditation on human presence, environmental interconnection, and the enduring resonance of story. Z exists as a bridge between imagination and reality. It resides in the myths passed through generations, in the journals and letters of explorers, and in the slow uncovering of archaeological and ecological evidence. Its dual existence reminds us that curiosity is both a personal and shared experience, a way of engaging with the unknown that enriches understanding while nurturing empathy. The lost city, whether fully realized in stone or preserved in narrative, offers a model for how human inquiry can unfold with grace and thoughtfulness. The lessons of the Amazon and Z extend to our own lives. We are reminded that discovery is often incremental, guided by attentive observation rather than immediate conquest. That mystery need not provoke anxiety, but can inspire contemplation. That knowledge, whether drawn from legend, science, or lived experience, is most enduring when pursued with patience, humility, and ethical regard for the world around us. In this reflective space, Z becomes a companion in thought, encouraging us to approach our own challenges and questions with the same gentle curiosity. The people of the Amazon, past and present, also offer quiet guidance. Indigenous communities have long navigated the forest with an intimate understanding of its rhythms, cultivating its soils, respecting its creatures, and weaving human life into the pulse of the ecosystem. Their knowledge, preserved through practice and oral tradition, enriches every exploration and every narrative of Z. It reminds us that human ingenuity flourishes when it is attuned to context, attentive to cycles, and guided by respect for both people and place. In walking mentally through Z, we are encouraged to embrace the interplay of story, evidence, and reflection. Legends spark imagination. Archaeology refines understanding, and contemplation unites them, allowing us to perceive the forest, the city, and ourselves in a single, meditative frame. The lost city is a symbol of this union, a quiet monument to human curiosity, adaptability, and reverence for the world we inhabit. Even as new discoveries emerge, the forest preserves its mysteries. Geoglyphs, earthworks, and remnants of past settlements remain partially hidden, reminding us that some truths are meant to unfold slowly. This gentle withholding encourages respect for process and time, teaching that wonder is amplified when approached with patience rather than haste. In this way, Z continues to live as both legend and lesson, guiding observers toward a deeper appreciation of history, culture, and the natural world. And so, the journey rests here, in quiet reverence for the forest, the legend, and the enduring heart of Z. The city may not reveal all its streets, and the forest may guard its final secrets. Yet the act of walking these paths, whether in imagination, study, or reflection, leaves a lasting imprint. Z endures in our attention, our curiosity, and the meditative care with which we engage the world. As we close this chapter, we carry forward a sense of serenity and wonder. The Amazon teaches that the most profound lessons are often quiet, discovered in observation, contemplation, and the gentle unfolding of time. The lost city of Z, with all its mystery and promise, invites us to walk softly, listen carefully, and reflect deeply, carrying the calm curiosity of exploration into our own lives. If this journey through the Amazon and the enduring mystery of Z has sparked your curiosity, take a moment to pause and reflect on the stories that the world quietly holds. Subscribe to join us for more immersive journeys into history, legend, and the human experience, where every civilization, every lost city, and every whispered tale invites calm curiosity and thoughtful exploration. And if you've enjoyed traveling through the forests, rivers, and legends with us tonight, consider sharing this story with someone who cherishes quiet wonder and reflective learning. Together, we can keep the past alive, not just in memory, but in the way we observe, listen, and imagine the world around us.